Lu Feng and Wang Jinggang were consumed with terror, and so they quickly took off running into the forest. Han Sen stood firm, coldly looking at the hand. He may have encountered ghostly-looking creatures before, but he did not believe that genuine spirits of the deceased ghosts actually existed. The figure's hand burned hot with a life force. If it was a ghost, how could there be a life force? But the pale hand swung to the lid of the coffin and sent it flying away. A humanoid body then stood up from inside the coffin. The person was slender like a skeleton and was 2 meters tall, an average human height. But the person was so gaunt, they were little more than skin and bones. The skin was discolored, with a greenish hue. He was pale, and it was difficult to determine whether or not blood pumped inside his body. The eyes of the person were pitch black, and the hair was gray and long enough to brush the ground. After emerging from his grave, the person used his black eyes to look all around. As they scanned his environment, they fell upon Han Sen, and they did not move away from him. Han Sen was shocked, but he was not afraid. He had encountered far more terrifying foes in the past than the one he was seeing now. The reason for his surprise, however, was the tattoo that glazed the figure's entire back. The person's skin was rough but thin, like the bark of a dying tree. Its tattoo, though, was as red and lively as an actual flame. It looked fresh. The cat-like symbol adorned its entire back. The image of the cat seemed to suggest it was sleepy, with half-open eyes. The tattoo seemed so real. Han Sen had come to be very familiar with this tattoo, as it was the symbol of the 9-life cat. He had seen the image adorning cards that belonged to the Blood Legion. Zero had a tattoo of the same image, and Han Sen also owned a necklace depicting the same thing. Might Zero have some relation to this person? Han Sen asked himself, as he looked upon the figure with apprehension. The figure continued to look back at Han Sen, his pitch-black eyes masking any emotion he might have sought to express. Their eyes met for 3 long seconds before the person suddenly bore a smile. The teeth that were presented were clean and tidy, but still, the way in which they were shown would creep any onlooker out. A chill ran down Han Sen's back, alongside a sudden outbreak of goosebumps. Boom! The man stepped forward and onto the blood-stained soil. Then, strange things began to occur. The blood from the deceased started to look alive. The blood flowed towards the person's feet, soaking into his veins and coursing through his skin up to his heart. Han Sen could see the blood enter his blood vessels. The veins were like narrow snakes, wreathing their way through his thin skin. It was a creepy and unnerving sight. He continued stepping forward, and wherever his feet went, so did the blood. The veins were lumpy, but slowly, the body started to look healthier. Before long, the figure started to look like a real, living person again. "Who are you?" Han Sen asked, as the man coldly approached him. "You are a human? Haha. Who is irrelevant, but I am not a human. Understand that?" The man presented another weird smile, which only added to the creepiness. "If you are not a human, what are you?"
Han Sen asked.
"What am I?" "Haha. You are asking me what I am?" "Haha." The man's laugh was a maniacal cackle. After a time of absorbing more blood, he looked healthier. Even the color returned to his hair, going from gray to a deep, rich, and shiny black color. Aside from his strange black eyes, the person could be mistaken for any average human. Han Sen thought of him as your typical pretty boy right now, albeit one with a sinister streak. Did I say something funny?
Han Sen coldly sighed.
As a Blood Legion faithful, are you telling me you do not recognize Son of Fate? Since when has Blood Legion fallen so far? The man stopped smiling now, and asked Han Sen with a stare of weighty gravitas. "You are from Blood Legion?" Han Sen was shocked. If he was from Blood Legion, did that mean Zero was from Blood Legion as well? Han Sen thought about it some more, and came to the conclusion she must have had some sort of connection to Blood Legion. If she didn't, there'd be no reason for her to have that tattoo. And this person appeared right after she entered the tree. "You are a devout member of the Blood Legion, are you not? And you say you don't know me? You are ignorant, but that is okay. I will accept you as a sacrifice." After he said that, he reached out his hand and tried to grab Han Sen's neck. The sharp nails almost scraped Han Sen's skin, but he was quick to dodge with the spring of a lunging snake. The strange man looked surprised and said, "Heavenly Go? As a Blood Legion member, how did you come to learn such a thing?" "Stop saying that. I'm not a member of Blood Legion. I don't have anything to do with you or them. So, tell me, if you are from Blood Legion, why were you in the coffin?" Han Sen frowned, wanting to extract as much information as he could before things turned too sour. "Haha, you think you can hide your faith from me by simply not admitting your belief in our cause? You smell like the Blood Legion, boy, and that is one fragrance you can never be free of. You are of the Blood Legion, and only through the price of your own blood can you leave it. Do something meaningful with your pathetic self and give me your blood." Son of Fate moved. He was fast, and he ran directly in front of Han Sen.
Young.
Han Sen summoned his flaming Rex spike and did not delay in engaging the creepy man. The nails collided with the flaming Rex spike, ringing out a sound of struck metal. The powerful force of their collision made Han Sen fall back with his flaming Rex spike. Son of Fate was no weaker than a super creature, it would seem. But Son of Fate looked surprised. He spoke to himself, saying, "How long was I asleep for? Are humans able to rival super creatures? Can they obtain super geno points and their beast souls? It is better that way. Your blood is sure to taste even better, boy." Son of Fate displayed a wild, ravenous smile. The blood-red tongue licked his lip with an evil greed.
Young. Young. Young.
Son of Fate's body was supremely fast. His hands attacked Han Sen from each and every angle, and although he was able to block each strike, it was remarkable to acknowledge that Son of Fate was only using his fists. The force that collided with Han Sen's flaming Rex spike was greater than the average super creature. Han Sen used his Dongxian aura to get a better reading of his opponent's life force. What he could see was a mess. The energy didn't flow with any cohesion, and the power he had seemed to have come from the blood he had absorbed. Even Dongxian aura was unable to simulate power such as that. Not bad. You are able to block all of my attacks. That can only mean your blood must be a sweet nectar. I'm looking forward to my first sip, boy. Son of Fate's face was consumed with greed or lust, eyeing Han Sen with the beady eyes of a snake. And just like one, he liked his lips with his forked tongue. Son of Fate's movements were incredibly odd. He didn't quite seem human, as he had the ability to rotate his head 180 degrees. PSS. A nail clipped by the side of Han Sen's neck, drawing blood. Son of Fate, at a strange angle, ravenously gorged on the blood that dripped from his finger. With a weird smile, he said, "It's too delicious." Han Sen could not explain the smile. The best he could compare it to was a starving wolf coming across a fresh carcass. Boom! Son of Fate cracked the air, reaching his nails out for Han Sen's heart. With his Dongxian movements, Han Sen was able to dodge. He then asked his foe a question. "Can I ask you why you believe me to be from Blood Legion? I am honest when I tell you I am not." "Haha, honest, come on, you cannot deny it. You smell like one, plain and simple." Son of Fate was like an impish demon, twisting and rotating his body and limbs in a grotesque fashion, an acrobatic feat no human could ever hope to perform. His hands kept reaching out for Han Sen's neck as he went. Han Sen was able to dodge each attempted strike, and as he did, he pulled out his 9-life cat necklace. Then he asked, "Is this what you smell?" When Son of Fate saw the necklace, he froze. His black eyes stared at the 9-life cat necklace as he began to shiver. "Relica, the Blood King watches over me, guiding me to its finding." He spoke with a tone that was a mixture of both joy and grief. It was creepy. Han Sen looked at his face and understood what he meant. The relic he needed was the necklace Han Sen had always carried. Why would Great-Grandpa possess a relic from Blood Legion? Han Sen knew where the necklace came from, but instead of this providing clarity, it only confused him more. Han Sen wanted to ask something, but Son of Fate attacked like an enraged, toxic snake in a bid to snatch the 9-life cat necklace away from Han Sen. "Is this a relic belonging to Blood Legion? What does it do? And why are you here?" Han Sen kept on dodging as he fired his questions, hoping this encounter could elucidate certain things and provide the answers he has long sought. But Son of Fate ignored his questions, and his eyes suggested he was fixated on the necklace and the necklace alone. His whole body was getting red in excitement, and it was clear that his power was growing alongside it. Han Sen could see his blood beginning to boil and burn, increasing his strength. His desire for the necklace was driving him insane, like a devil straight from hell. The nails were swung with greater vigor, and one swing nicked Han Sen's face. Son of Fate licked every droplet of blood he had managed to steal. Answer my questions. Han Sen coldly looked at Son of Fate, acknowledging how powerful his opponent was. But Han Sen did not care. Right now, he wanted answers more than anything, and that was what he was determined to get. Nothing would stop him. Your fate is to be a sacrifice to me. There is no need for you to know anything else. Simmer down, boy. Son of Fate's eyes were still full of greed, and his face twitched with a lust for murder. Han Sen stopped dodging his attacks and instead swung his fist towards him. Pang! A giant bolt of lightning was discharged between them both, deafeningly loud. Sonic Thunder Punch was unable to mess up his opponent's life force, due to his energy already being messed up. But the thunder power was effective in semi-paralyzing his enemy, slowing him down considerably. Roar! Han Sen's body expanded, growing to become a 3-meter-tall silver ape. The strong arm picked Son of Fate up into the air by grabbing him by the head. Pang! Pang! Han Sen, still clutching his head, drove his body into the ground again and again. He pummeled him in this way countless times, and when he was done, there was a deep hole in the earth in the shape of Son of Fate's body. Han Sen threw him back down into the pit and smacked him in the head. Boom! The power created an even deeper hole, with Son of Fate inside. His skull had been cracked open, and his body was twisted in a lurid fashion. Han Sen picked him up once more and threw a punch into his face. The nose was pulverized into jelly. Right before the body was launched into the air like a cannonball. He broke many trees on his descent before he was brought to a stop. Can you answer my questions now, Son of Fate? Han Sen stood in front of his beaten opponent, whose body was twisted and mashed in a ghastly state. No longer did Son of Fate have the wild, crazy-eyed momentum that drove him earlier.
Impossible. Impossible.
Humans in the second God's sanctuary should not have such power. Son of God's face was broken beyond recognition, but he had not been killed and could still muster words for speak. Still, his body had been broken completely, and he was unable to move. With obvious shock, he looked at Han Sen. Let me ask you something. In Blood Legion, is there a man called Han Jingji? Han Sen looked at Son of Fate, who was dazed. He looked ready to say something, but then, it was as if he saw something terrifying. His pupils shrank.
Impossible. Impossible.
Son of Fate looked as if he had seen a ghost, and his body began to tremble and convulse. Then, nothing. He froze in place, slumped on the ground. Han Sen looked in the direction that Son of Fate's gaze had stiffened, and noticed it was Zero who he had seen. She had emerged from the Tree King and was now approaching them. Zero had already returned to her human form, but her hands held a red knife. The knife was around a foot long, and it was completely red. It had skeletal characteristics, and its color made it look like a bone that had been soaked in blood. Han Sen frowned, unsure why Son of Fate would be so scared upon seeing Zero.
Impossible. Impossible.
Son of Fate was screaming like a madman, and he looked horrified. Han Sen looked at him, ready to tell him to shut up, but before he could, a red flash cut across his vision. When his eyes steadied their focus, he saw the blood-bone knife lodge itself in Son of Fate's heart. Son of Fate twitched. All the blood in his body began to course towards his heart, forming a coagulated lump. Then, his skin shriveled and dried out, becoming another unrecognizable, skeletal husk of a corpse, just like the rest in the area.
Han Senes Ejebrofsjomped.
He did not know where Zero had gotten this knife, but she had callously murdered Son of Fate with no given reason. Zero walked in front of Son of Fate and pulled the bone knife out of his heart. Why would you do that? You killed him, Han Sen asked, with his eyebrows furrowed. He deserved it, Zero answered. Whether or not he deserved it is irrelevant. I asked you why you killed him, So tell me, Han Sen asked again. Zero looked at Han Sen but did not speak. She merely looked at him the same way she always did. Han Sen looked at her bone knife and asked, "Where did you get that from?" "It was inside the tree," Zero answered. "You punched a hole into the tree so you could retrieve this knife?" Han Sen was surprised, and so he asked for confirmation. Zero nodded. "How did you know this bony knife was inside that tree?"
Han Sen asked.
Zero had never been to this area of the second god's sanctuary before, so how could she know the knife was there? "It was calling for me." Zero swung the bone knife. Han Sen reached out his hand, attempting to grab the knife and saying, "Let me take a look." But Zero quickly withdrew her hand and snapped, "Don't touch it." "Why not?" Han Sen frowned, thinking Zero was behaving abnormally. "You will die," Zero said, with a queasy amount of gravitas.
Han Sen frose.
He wasn't sure what she meant. Would he die if he touched it, or would she kill him if he laid a finger on it? Looking into Zero's clear eyes, Han Sen pondered what she meant. He was leaning towards the former, however, as he didn't believe Zero would simply kill him. Han Sen didn't ask any further questions. Instead, he returned his focus to the corpse of Son of Fate. He plundered his pockets in search of any notable loot he might have possessed. Son of Fate's body was not heavily clothed, and much of what he wore was already in tatters. After his body had dried up, the clothes were like loose strips of fabric crumpled across a twisted branch. There was nothing to be found, but when Han Sen looked at Son of Fate's back, he was shocked. The tattoo of the nine-life cat had completely disappeared. Han Sen checked every nook and cranny across his body, but he could not find anything remotely similar to the tattoo he had seen earlier. "Do you know who this man is?" Han Sen looked at Zero and posed the question. She shook her head. Han Sen believed she did not know anything, so he didn't ask again. He approached the coffin Son of Fate had been in. The coffin seemed to have been constructed from the wood of the local dark haunted trees, but there was nothing else of significance. The coffin was empty. Unable to find anything there, Han Sen instead turned his attention to the Tree King and started walking in its direction. No longer did it drain Han Sen's life force, so he walked right up to it without trepidation. He observed the hole that Zero had punched into it and noticed how eerie it looked. It seemed like an infinite abyss where no light could reach. Looking back at Zero, he saw that she was just following him in the casual manner she always did. Gritting his teeth, Han Sen entered the hole. The interior of the tree was big, but there did not seem to be anything special on the inside. There was nothing notable there for Han Sen to find. Strange. Han Sen frowned and looked at Zero. He wanted to ask her more questions, but it was unlikely she would answer him directly. Unable to find anything, Han Sen decided to ride atop his golden growler and go off in search of the missing Lu Feng and Wang Jiangang. When he found them, they were still in shock, but uninjured. The curse of the woods seemed to have been lifted, so Han Sen was able to lead them out. The dark haunted trees and bugs did not look any different than they used to, but nothing prohibited their exit. In fact, they found the borders of the forest relatively soon. The forest was only a few hundred miles wide, at the most. Lu Feng and Wang Jiangang's joy was only suppressed by their relief. After leaving the forest, they believed themselves incredibly fortunate to have survived in the forest all that time, including the dangers that had followed Han Sen's arrival. But still, an uneasy feeling over the ordeal had managed to latch itself onto Han Sen's mind. Zero's bloodbone knife had vanished from her hands, too, Han Sen noticed after some time. He wasn't sure where she put it. If the Nine-Life Cat's necklace is a relic of the Blood Legion, that means I will be able to practice the Blood Pulse Sutra, Han Sen thought, excitedly. Although he had already learned the Dongxian Sutra, the more he learned the better. What's more, the strengths of the Blood Pulse Sutra could benefit his next-in lineage, if he ever had a child. Han Sen followed the Blood Pulse Sutra and held the Nine-Life Cat necklace for its practice. It took him half a month before he could label himself a beginner, so it was clearly going to take quite some time before he unlocked its first gene lock. He practiced it frequently, on his trip towards Blue Crystal Shelter, and 6 days later, he found a second-generation super creature down near a riverbank. It looked like a serpent WYRM, and when it flew above the river, it attempted to eat Han Sen. Han Sen and the silver fox quickly beat it up, however. And because he had grown fond of smashing the skulls of his opponents lately, Han Sen made sure to turn into a silver ape to lay the smackdown. Super creature Riverbank, WYRM killed.
No beast soul gun.
The flesh of this creature is edible, and you may harvest its life geno essence. Consume its life geno essence to gain 0 to 10 super geno points randomly. Han Sen refined the WYRM's life geno essence and received 6 super geno points. He only needed 2 more points to max out now. The flesh of the creature was shared between the silver fox and the fairy. Soon, I will reach the third god's shelter. I hope my luck holds out. Han Sen was a little worried, but he still had the lotus symbol on his forehead. He went to a nearby human shelter to restock his supplies and ask around for where he might find more super creatures. Han Sen heard a strange tale, one that seemed worth checking out. He was told of a mountain that was repeatedly thunderstruck, night and day. If there was a super creature there, it was most likely one that adhered to the elements of thunder. If that was true, then its slaying would prove beneficial to the silver fox. Han Sen made plans to travel to Thunder Mountain, but before he left, someone came looking for him. Mr. Han, we are from Angel Gene. We would like to request your aid in slaying a super creature. Provided you have the time, we are happy to discuss the price for such an appeal. Zhao Shuabin was one of Angel Gene's managers, and he smiled as he made the request. The Zhao family are indeed shameless. First, they want to kill me. Now, they want my help. Han Sen could not help but laugh in his heart. His words told a different story, however, and he responded, "That depends on what super creature you're asking me to kill, and of course, the price is mentioned. If you are willing to help us with this task, then rest assured, the price will bring a smile to your face." Zhao Shuabin spoke softly and paused. After a brief while, he continued on by saying, "We want you to help us kill the Thunderbull that resides on Thunder Mountain." Han Sen couldn't believe such a coincidence could transpire, as the Thunderbull was his target, too. "Sure. It'll cost you 100 high-class Angel Gene fluids," Han Sen said, with a puffed-up chest.
Oh, Mr. Han.
Don't you think that price is just a little bit unreasonable? You know high-class Angel Gene fluids require royal Shura blood for their formulation. Our relationship with the Shura is bad enough, and so the procurement of this blood is difficult. 100 vials of Angel Gene fluid is too steep. Besides, we have our own team. We only require your assistance. We are not asking you to take on the super creature all by yourself." Zhao Shuabin blushed, undoubtedly feeling rather awkward over the proposition he had to decline. "You said your offer would bring a smile to my face. 100 vials of Angel Gene fluid is what that would take. If you can't oblige my price, then go ask someone else," Han Sen said sternly. It was true that the number of vials of Angel Gene fluid in circulation and available for purchase was low lately. Rarely could anyone afford to buy them, even if they could be found. Han Sen's request for 100 of such vials was quite ludicrous, and it would eat out an entire month of Angel Gene's revenue. "Mr. Han, your price is far too high. As much as I would like to, I cannot strike you this deal right now, but I will return to the Alliance and consult my supervisor," Zhao Shuabin suggested. "I am leaving the shelter 1 hour from now," Han Sen said. Zhao Shuabin nodded and said, "I'll be quick, so please wait." Han Sen thought the outrageous price he had suggested would be enough to scare them off and have them quit their intrusion. But unfortunately for him, Zhao Shuabin came back with a grin. He said, "Our company accepts your price. I have the vials with me, but will require you to sign this contract." Han Sen was surprised, to say the least. He looked over the contract's contents, and everything seemed to be in order. He looked at the crate of Angel Gene fluid, and noticed it had been stamped with their proper, official seal. If what was included within was not what he had requested, or if the Angel Gene fluid inside the vials was a cheap knockoff or a diluted variant of the liquid, he would be able to sue them. Okay. Han Sen signed the contract and accepted the 100 vials of Angel Gene fluid. When Han Sen left, a middle-aged man approached Zhao Shuabin and said, "Manager Zhao, 100 vials of high-class Angel Gene fluid is far too expensive." Zhao Shuabin shook his head and replied, "It's not as expensive as you think. We are unable to kill the bull ourselves, unfortunately. So, we have no choice but to ask him." He is the only person who owns a super pet right now, after all. But again, this is 100 high-class vials of angel gene fluid. Couldn't we use those ourselves to kill the Thunderbolt? Lu Gue pleaded. Zhao Shuabin laughed and said, this Thunderbolt can unleash AoE strikes. Even if we did manage to kill it, we'd incur far too many losses of personnel. We can lose the liquid, but we cannot lose our people. Asking Han Sen to do this, regardless of the price, is better for our future prosperity. We can always synthesize more of this liquid. It is only material. Louis Gue nodded and did not say anything further, as it wasn't his place to make such decisions. Anyway, go and get yourself ready. We will depart alongside Han Sen soon. The slaying of this Thunderbolt will be good for us, and if the boy does happen to fail, then he'll have to return the vials of angel gene fluid to us. Anyway, it will be even better for us if he ends up grievously wounded. The dark light of murder flickered from Zhao Shuabin's eyes. Han Sen sent the angel gene fluid back to the Alliance, allowing Ji Yanran to hold on to it. There was no chance he'd be returning that crate. And in regards to the Thunderbolt, he did not believe Angel Gene would make an honest deal. But if he could slay the creature, obtain the loot, and walk away with the fluid he had been offered, it was worth going with them. Anyway, Han Sen did not feel bad about doing bad things to the people of Angel Gene, if push came to shove. With Zero in tow, Han Sen went to rendezvous with the members of Angel Gene who were going to accompany him. Mr. Han, we are off to hunt a super creature. Are you sure it is appropriate of you to bring along a beautiful little girl? Zhao Shuabin mockingly suggested, upon laying eyes on Zero. It is only a super creature. She'll be fine, Han Sen said, as he stroked Zero's head. When Zhao Shuabin and Louis Gue heard what he said, they choked on their words of rebuttal. They believed Han Sen was far too arrogant for his own good, but they held their tongues. They brought 8 people to accompany Han Sen on their journey to the mountain where they'd fight the bull. Zero followed Han Sen from behind as usual, and it didn't seem as if the events that transpired in the dark haunted forest had affected her in the slightest. She just continued to follow him, with greater accuracy than his own shadow. It started to rain, and the road grew muddy and tough. But to the collective that scaled the lands past the safety of the shelter, it was nothing. Han Sen, riding Golden Growler, summoned Spirit Owl to fly above them and shield Zero from the rain. The area was stuffed with dark storm clouds, and thunder rolled unceasingly. It was so loud that it muffled the sound of all else. And behind the clouds, the distant light show of flickering lightning bolts played out rhythmically. The silver fox seemed very excited, and he jumped on top of Golden Growler's head. He looked off into the distance, peering at Thunder Mountain. His eyes surveyed the lands, as if it was looking for something in particular. Boom! A lightning bolt streaked across the skies like the forming of a spider web, illuminating the wet, darkened land. Han Sen used the light to view the black peak they were headed towards. It was higher than any other mountain in the area, and it was so tall it was as if it connected to the very sky itself. All of the lightning seemed to come from that mountain, as if it was some natural, rocky lightning rod. Mr. Han, that is Thunder Mountain, home of the Thunderbolt, Zhao Shuabin said, as he pointed towards the craggy peak. It took them half a day's travel, all in all, to reach the foot of Thunder Mountain. Every inch closer that they traveled, the dread that the treacherous mountain instilled increased. Lightning continued to flash in the skies, striking the peak a number of times. Each flash sent a number of broken rocks plummeting to the earth below. Weird. Why are there no creatures around? This is strange.
Lui Guy frowned.
It is strange. The last time we came here, there were many other creatures. But this time, we haven't seen a single one. Zhao Shuabin was confused, as well. Han Sen jovially thought to himself, duh, that's because of the silver fox. With this cute little blighter by my side, creatures pestering my travel are a thing of the past. It's better without them, isn't it? We can freely slay the Thunderbolt. When Han Sen said this, he immediately began riding Golden Growler up the mountainside. In that case, we are depending on you, Zhao Shuabin politely said to Han Senator after Han Sen took off. Zhao Shuabin turned around and said to his men, be careful, the Thunderbolt may appear at any second. Maintain vigilance. Yes. They all answered in unison. Slowly but surely, They ascended the mountain in Han Sen's dusty wake. Boom! Lightning continued to strike, and not once was there a lull in its rhythmic impacts. The thunder repeatedly struck the rocks of the mountain, emitting wild showers of sparks. Han Sen was ahead, but it wasn't long before he slowed down. The environment was fairly bad and unsuitable for haste. If this was the Thunderbull's home turf, he knew he'd have to be more careful, as he'd be at a disadvantage. The silver fox maintained its excitement by standing on Golden Growler's head, staring at the peak in the distance. It took them an hour of travel to reach the midway point of the mountain, but still, they had yet to come across the Thunderbull they were hunting. Manager Zhao, perhaps that bull is gone, Han Sen suggested to Zhao. Zhao Shuabin wore a look of confusion, and he said, "Whenever we used to come here, it would quickly approach our intrusion at the foot of the mountain. Even if it was on the peak, it should have descended upon us long ago. Today's absence of the beast is strange, indeed." Did the Thunderbull really leave this place? Louis Gue asked, with concern. "Let's keep going. Don't drop your guard, though, just in case." Zhao Shuabin frowned. They had been meaning to slay this Thunderbull for quite some time. They had failed a number of times and lost many people in their previous attempts. The bull could cast fierce attacks, including AoE strikes. This was why they had to approach Han Sen and request his aid. They were at their wits' end. If the bull had truly gone, then it would be a great loss for them. The contract stated that if the bull had vacated the area, then Han Sen was eligible to keep half of the proposed vials of angel gene fluid. With great worry, they continued their ascent to the peak. All the while, the thunder became worse and worse. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck a rock that was only a few meters away from Han Sen. But the rock seemed indestructible, and it had not been harmed by the lightning. It was still perfectly smooth, and not a single blemish had been brought to it. As they went higher, the frequency of the lightning increased. After another hour's travel, one bolt struck a man called Feng Lin. He was struck while on his mount, and he was almost killed outright. Heavily injured, the hair of his head had mostly been burnt away. He was shocked. Fortunately, the strike wasn't too strong, and the man managed to stand up after it occurred, much to the surprise of everyone. Everyone took extra care after that, summoning shields and protective armaments for defense against any more renegade bolts of lightning that sought to strike them. It was fortunate they did this as well, due to the increased frequency of thunder and lightning. As they ascended, everyone suffered at least one lightning strike. Others were unfortunate enough to receive more than one. Only Han Sen and his companions did not get shocked, despite how large of a target the Golden Growler was. Strangely, the lightning ignored them for the duration of their travel. Han Sen acknowledged this was the work of the Silver Fox. Little Silver, the Thunder Master, could bend the will of lightning to avoid itself and its companions. Han Sen hugged the Silver Fox and quietly said, "Little Silver, could you draw more of the lightning over to them?" The Silver Fox looked at Han Sen and tilted its head, signifying its understanding of Han Sen's request. Then, a glint of evil birthed in its eyes. The Silver Fox jumped back away from Han Sen's chest, returning to Golden Growler's head. It looked at the thunder streaking across the sky. Boom! A lightning bolt struck perfectly atop Louis Gue's head. It shattered his armor and knocked him from his ride. He convulsed on the muddy ground, twitching in agony. Everyone stopped to check on his well-being. Fortunately for them, they had all unlocked their genes locks and were able to withstand such hits. Manager Zhao, the frequency of lightning increases as we ascend. It is likely we will all be injured before we reach the top, and if the bull does reside there, our ability to fight will be gone, Louis Gue said. Zhao Shuabin looked at the lightning in the sky, but he knew that if they turned back now, they'd be handing over the angel gene fluid to Han Sen for free. Then again, they could end up injured or even worse, if they maintain their current course, just as Louis Gue said. Zhao Shuabin gave his conundrum some thought, but settled on saying, "We are not far from the peak. If we get there and do not find the bull, we will return immediately." After he said that, everyone mounted their rides again and continued up the treacherous slopes of the mountain. Following this, more and more lightning continued to strike, accurately hitting each of the angel gene members and injuring them. Han Sen looked ahead to the peak. He could not see anything there yet, but he began to sense a powerful life force stemming from there. He knew something had to be up there. He was just unsure whether or not it was the thunderbolt he had pledged to kill. Regardless of what it was, however, Han Sen did not think the others could make it. The silver fox's eyes flashed with silver, in a connection with the lightning that streamed across the skies. Every time a new bolt appeared, his eyes flashed silver and a scream would erupt from behind. This is strange. Why has the lightning not harmed you once? They were starting to suspect something was wrong, and after Louis Gue was struck again, he couldn't hold himself from confronting Han Sen. Perhaps it is because I am not a wretched man who has committed several atrocities?
Han Sen coldly sighed.
You. Louis Gue was quickly infuriated by the response he was given. He pointed his finger towards Han Sen and barked, "You must have done something." "Fine, I admit it. I made the lightning keep striking you. You weren't just unlucky, okay? It was me. Are you satisfied?" Han Sen shrugged his shoulders. Louis Gue didn't know what to say. The thunder came from the sky, and Han Sen clearly didn't produce the lightning. Therefore, he didn't believe it was Han Sen and couldn't outright blame the man for doing what he had truthfully admitted to doing. "Mr. Han, you have misunderstood his meaning. We are wondering if you have a way of preventing the lightning from striking you. Perhaps if you share your method, we could avoid being struck as well. We might finish this adventure a little faster, too," Zhao Shuabin said. "I am a giver, not a receiver. So, believe me when I say I would be willing to share a method, if I had one. I truthfully haven't a clue why the lightning hasn't struck me or my lovelies," Han Sen responded. Zhao Shuabin frowned, thinking it highly unlikely for Han Sen to try to trick them. But if Han Sen really was simply lucky, that amount of luck seemed impossible. "You must have a beast soul to protect you from the lightning, is that it?" Louis Gue rejoined the conversation with a raised finger and voice. "Wow, how rude. With such a disrespectful tone, I do not believe there is anything I can do for you," Han Sen said. "Well, if you don't have such a beast soul, how about you slow down and dismount, so we can all walk together?" Louis Gue firmly believed he had discovered the truth, and so he shouted out the suggestion. Zhao Shuabin looked at Han Sen, wondering what his response would be.
Han Sen sighed. Okay.
"Sure, that's fine by me." Everyone put away their mounts and surrounded Han Sen like penguins. If Han Sen did have a beast soul to protect him from the thunder, they believed they ought to have been close enough for its protection to extend to them, too. 2 steps later, lightning struck Louis Gue's head again. He fell on the ground like a sack of rocks. From the strength of the bolt that hit him, it seemed far more severe than the earlier strikes. The silver fox, in Zero's arms, bore a sinister grin. Everyone looked at Han Sen with a queer expression, and just as Louis Gue was pulling himself back up, another person was struck by a thunderbolt. As they continued their ascent of the mountain, the thunder became worse. They were still 3 miles from the peak, and the lightning was already injuring the elites and making them too weary to go on. "I do not believe this *T. Louis Gue kept on walking, unable to believe that the thunder could not hit Han Sen. But the lightning kept striking the team, and most of them were injured. Han Sen and Zero hadn't suffered a single singed hair. By comparison, if Han Sen had protection, Zero should have been susceptible to the lightning strikes, too. But she hadn't been dealt any harm, and the lightning never touched her. The lightning only ever struck the Angel Gene members. It was very odd. "It must be you. Arg." Louis Gue was incredibly mad, and just as he turned to bark at Han Sen and start pointing more fingers, a bolt of lightning struck his head. His helmet was blown off, and his face turned black. He dropped to the ground again, but this time, he did not move. He had passed out, and he almost looked as if he was going to die. "I told you. If you are unlucky, it is likely karma. If you do bad things will happen to you. In this case, you'll be struck by lightning." Han Sen coldly spoke down to Louis Gue, who was on the ground. "Mr. Han, can you please tell us why the thunder only attacks us? Don't tell me you are simply lucky. Luck of that breadth does not exist." Zhao Shuabin was starting to lose his patience now. The other people angrily stared at Han Sen, muttering mean words beneath their breath. "What? You guys seriously want to fight me? If you do, come get some," Han Sen coldly said. Zhao Shuabin's people were all shocked. Although they all had angel gene fluid, they had all been severely injured by the repeated lightning strikes. Fighting Han Sen, who had a super pet, would be difficult to say the least. Zhao Shuabin did not want to use the liquid until the last second, so his face suddenly changed. With a forced smile, he said, Mr. Han, you have misunderstood us once again. I was merely stating it has been an unlikely string of coincidences that have left you uncharred by the lightning strikes. But we are partners for the time being, and partners must exercise completely honesty with each other.
Fine.
Do you really want to know why the thunder won't touch me?
Han Sen smiled.
Yes, please tell us. Zhao Shuabin politely exclaimed. Han Sen did not answer verbally. He looked up and saw another thunderbolt, and as it descended, he threw his fist up high. Lightning came out from his fist and impacted the incoming bolt. The explosion that came as a result knocked everyone down onto the ground. They all looked pale, and many of them started heaving blood. They all looked upon Han Sen with shock, as if he was some god. They dare believe they can strike me? Han Sen said, and then ignored them, continuing his ascent of the mountain. The people looked on in disbelief. They quickly scrambled to their feet and followed Han Sen up to the peak as if they were his disciples. No longer did anyone think about using angel gene fluid to combat him. For a punch to sunder fires born on the wind was incredible, and they had clearly underestimated Han Sen's power. No matter how much angel gene fluid they injected into themselves, they did not believe they had what it took to take down Han Sen. The area that surrounded them was still getting battered by lightning, and fighting a person who commanded such lightning would be a fool's errand. They knew they wouldn't stand a chance. How can Sonic Thunder Punch be that powerful? It's stronger than what most surpassers can do, Feng Lin stated. Shocked, Han Sen defeating Yu Kailand was not simply down to luck. His Sonic Thunder Punch really is that scary, Zhao Shuabin said. What do we do? Do we just keep going? Feng Lin had lost his nerve and was prepared to escape, and he was not alone in that thought. They knew they weren't half as strong as Han Sen, so they did not dare continue forward. Zhao Shuabin sighed and said, Fine, we'll wait here. If the Thunderbolt is on the peak, Han Sen won't be able to hide his killing of it. Anyway, he can most likely do it solo. When everyone heard they would not have to reach the top to fight a super creature, they were washed with relief. They carried the dying Louis Gue away. Through the Silver Fox's protection, Han Sen and Zero had almost reached the top without trouble. Then, he saw something. It's a super creature, and it isn't alone. Han Sen, seeing the peak ahead, looked surprised. On the thunder-wreathed mountaintop rested a silver thunder flower, and in its center, the bud flickered with gold electricity. Near the thunder flower were two super creatures locked in combat with each other. To the right was a 3-meter-tall bull. Its horns shimmered green and crackled with electricity, drawing more and more thunder down on the mountain like rain. To the left was a fox with 3 tails. Its snow-white tails wagged quickly, generating a field of lightning. It seemed to be able to control thunder, as well. The two thunder element super creatures were currently in a standoff with one another. Neither moved forward. They just remained motionless, watching each other intensely, occasionally eyeing the catalyst of their animosity, the flower. I've hit the jackpot. Not only are there 2 second-generation super creatures here, but there's this wonderful little flower. The silver fox is in the money. When Han Sen viewed the scene, he became delightfully happy. The silver fox jumped out of Zero's arms with his eyes fixed on the thunder flower. Its previously elegant appearance had been eschewed in favor of hunger, but Han Sen grabbed it by the fur and pulled it back. The silver fox did its best to struggle, but Han Sen held it tightly in his arms. Han Sen knew the flower was something most desirable, and it'd be rich in nutrients for the silver fox. However, there were 2 super creatures ahead, and neither looked friendly or charitable. If the silver fox approached right now, it'd incite their ire. Han Sen would have been better off waving a red flag. That being said, Han Sen knew he had what it took to bring down both super creatures. He merely worried over the noise he might generate. If there was too much noise, it'd be difficult to hide it all from Zhao Shuabin, and Han Sen never planned on handing over the life geno essence of the bull if they killed it. It would have been fine for them to have it if it was a first-generation super creature, but there was no chance he'd give up a second-generation's life geno essence. Little Silver, hush hush, there is no need to rush. Look closely, the thunder flower has not yet bloomed. If it was ready for consumption, I'm fairly sure those two creatures would be doing more than having a staring competition. Han Sen comforted the struggling silver fox. The words actually calmed the silver fox, and it quit trying to wriggle its way free. Still, it kept its eyes locked on the flower without blinking. Every now and again, lightning struck the center of the flower. Whenever this occurred, the flower was not harmed. In fact, it appeared to become brighter and more lively looking after every strike and shock. It seemed as if it could consume electricity. In the center of the flower, a golden thunderfruit grew. It was currently about the size of an average egg. Gold lightning flickered across it, shimmering in a condensed spectacle that was reminiscent of an aerial view of the galaxy. I wonder how long it'll take for this fruit to mature? As Han Sen observed it, he was unsure when it would mature. Though it clearly wasn't ready yet, judging from the behavior of the three-tailed fox and the thunderbolt, if it had matured by now, one would be tearing out the other's throat for sure. Han Sen summoned his spirit owl and death knell. Then, he placed the fairy in a position of potential ambush. With Zero and the silver fox, Han Sen returned down the mountain a bit. Like a troublesome child, the silver fox wasn't keen to leave the flower unattended. It went into a fit of struggling, but still, Han Sen was able to carry him down. He couldn't leave him up there, as he did not want to evoke suspicion from Zhao Shuabin. If Han Sen killed the super creatures, he could retrieve their goods but would have to return the angel gene fluid. That is, unless he never wanted to return to the Alliance again. So, he hatched a scheme. If he returned to them now and reported his findings of there being no super creature atop the mountain, he could keep 50 of the vials of angel gene fluid. With his 3 pets up there, killing the 2 super creatures shouldn't prove too difficult either. Han Sen, with the silver fox in his arms and Zero in tow, descended the sharp slope of the peak towards Zhao Shuabin and his men. He told them he had not seen the thunderbolt on the peak. The thunderbolt really isn't there? Someone didn't put much stock in Han Sen's false claim. Go have a look yourself, if you don't believe me, Han Sen said. Zhao Shuabin was feeling very awkward, right now. Neither of them dared to reascend the mountain, but if they went home at this point, they had no choice but to pay Han Sen 50 angel gene fluids. It was a significant loss. The thunder was their biggest concern with climbing back up, and they believed it took flying off the table too. If they were shocked while flying, they'd plummet to the ground and potentially die. You guys continue looking around for that thunderbolt. Remember, you have 7 days to find it, before having to hand over the sweet 50% of that angel gene fluid. After Han Sen said this, he started walking away. Hang on, we'll go take a look then.
Zhao Shuabin stoppade Han Sen.
He couldn't go back to angel gene empty-handed, so he had to ascend the mountain in its entirety, or at least risk life and limb trying to. Sure, I'll wait for you here. Han Sen found a rock and then sat down. He was not hopeful in their success of scaling the rest of the mountain and seeing what was actually up there. Even without the silver fox's thunder pranks, it wasn't likely they could get close. There were 2 thunder super creatures up there, and a thunderflower to boot. No ordinary person could get near. The silver fox had given Han Sen super pets a buff to prevent lightning from hitting them. That was how they could safely remain on the peak. Unless the fruit matured and the super creatures started fighting, the people were unlikely to see or catch a whiff of the bowl. Zhao Shuabin only brought a few people with him, those who had suffered the least damage from the lightning. When they reached an area with much lightning, they used angel gene fluid to rush up the peak. They did not dare go slow. They wanted all of this to be over as soon as possible, so they ran up as fast as their legs could carry them. One look at the peak, to confirm the bull wasn't there, was all they needed. Things seemed fine in the beginning, and the angel gene fluid seemed to strengthen them enough to withstand the strikes of lightning. But when they were within 1 kilometer of the peak, the lightning grew a lot worse. Boom! 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 Han Sen squinted his eyes as he sat on the rock. Then he heard a lot of thunder. The lightning was like a heavy downpour, and it was quite scary to hear. Han Sen did not feel any sympathy for Angel Gene's people, So he casually stroked the restless silver fox and smiled. Not long after, Zhao Shuabin and his people returned with pitch-black faces. Their hair had been mostly burned off, and smoldering patches of ruined skin riddled their bodies. They looked bad. "Mr. Han, the thunderbolt is there atop the peak. We saw it,"
Xiao Kebin happily exclaimed to Han Sen.
the others excitedly chimed in, saying, "Mr. Han, the bull is there on the peak. Please, go and slay it." "You really saw the thunderbolt?"
Han Sen eyed Xiao Kebin curiously.
"Yes, Mr. Han. Please hurry, do not let it get away," Zhao Shuabin hastily responded. Han Sen shrugged his shoulders. He knew they hadn't seen the thunderbolt, for they did not have what it took to scale the peak. If they had seen the thunderbolt, they would have also mentioned the three-tailed fox and the thunderflower. They were purposely lying to Han Sen. Knowing this, Han Sen still smiled and said, "I understand how you feel, but let's be honest. There is no bull up there. For me to go back up, there would be nothing more than a waste of time. Mr. Han, we really saw the bull." Zhao Shuabin was still determined to make Han Sen believe they had seen the bull. They each pleaded for Han Sen to go up and slay it, but Han Sen knew what they were planning. If there was a bull up there, and Han Sen did not kill it, they could claim Han Sen violated the contract, and they would not have to pay Han Sen with the vials of angel gene fluid. If this matter was taken to court, they wouldn't be able to prove a thing, but that wouldn't matter. Even if their claims were thrown out the airlock, it would still be enough to tarnish Han Sen's reputation. "Now, are you sure you saw the bull?" Han Sen asked with a smile. "It is up there. We weren't mistaken," Zhao Shuabin said. "And you're sure it's the thunderbolt?"
Han Sen asked.
"Yes, unmistakably," Zhao Shuabin quickly answered. "And there was nothing else?"
Han Sen asked.
"Nope, nothing. Just the bull." Zhao Shuabin believed Han Sen was testing his claim. "Then I will go and slay it." Han Sen promptly stood up and started walking off towards the peak again. Zero and the silver fox went with him. When Han Sen arrived at the peak, the three-tailed fox and the bull were still there, locked in their staring competition. Han Sen summoned Little Angel and commanded to both her and the silver fox, "Kill the bull first, guys." After that, Han Sen's combined force of sonic and thunder powers coursed this body to gather in his fists. When primed, he took aim at the bull. The little angel flew up high with eyes of flame of a green fire and swung her great sword towards the bull. Death Knell also went airborne, ready to trap the bull in its tolling maw. Meanwhile, the spirit owl hooted menacingly on its way towards its given target. The silver fox gleamed with silver electricity, transforming into a thunder fox. It leapt towards the bull fiercely. When the bull took notice of the large host of super creatures bearing down on it, it looked ready to scream in fright. Pang! Sonic thunder punch exploded, drowning out all other sounds, the desperate cry of the bull included. Following that force, it couldn't muster the composure necessary for another cry for a long time to come. Little Angel's sword slashed across his neck, forming a deep crevice from which blood cascaded. Before it could make a sound, something muted the bull's voice box. Han Sen's flaming Rex spike had been shoved deep into its throat, drilling with a mutilating force and a green flame. The silver fox and the spirit owl now struck the thunderbolt in unison, delivering a multitude of deep lacerations across its flesh, draining its blood. The thunderbolt tried to gather lightning to discharge and dispel its attackers, but beneath the barrage of fierce hits, it couldn't do a thing. The next moment, Death Knell appeared on top of it. Although it moved slowly, the thunderbolt could not escape amidst the artillery of assault it was incurring. The Death Knell successfully landed on top of it.
Young.
The death knell tolled for the injured bull, and in its devastated state, it could not withstand the sound. Its face began to bleed and its entire body began to dry, crack, and ooze. When the bell arose, Little Angel delivered one final strike to the Thunderbull's head. Super creature, Thunder Devil Bull killed.
No beast soul gun.
The flesh of this creature is edible, and you may harvest its life geno-essence. Consume its life geno-essence to gain 0 to 10 super geno points randomly. Upon witnessing the bull's massacre, the three-tailed fox had frozen. It initially believed it was only the two of them who were vying for the fruit, and it didn't expect so many horrible creatures to suddenly appear and slay its sole competitor. Super creatures were intelligent, and upon seeing its situation, the three-tailed fox did not dare remain. It quickly fled the mountaintop. Han Sen commanded Little Angel to chase after it, but not kill it. He wanted it to pursue Zhao Xuebin and his people down the mountain. Han Sen and Zero followed after the fox as well. The silver fox, Death Knell, and Spirit Owl remained atop the mountain to guard the flower and the dead bull's corpse. Zhao Xuebin heard the sounds of battle drifting down from the peak, and with great glee, he said, Han Sen was lying. The Thunderbull was indeed up there. Pa, it is lucky our little scheme worked. He is too much of a noob to try to trick people like us. You can't con Min. I hope Han Sen and the bull both end up injured. If that happens, we can kill them both at once, Feng Lin excitedly said. Amidst everyone's happiness, a snow-white shadow began to descend from the mountaintop, ready to sour their mood. They initially believed it to be the bull coming down, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was not the bull. It was a fox with 3 tails. Oh no! Run! Run for your lives! Zhao Xuebin's face dropped like a sack of rocks, and he quickly yelled for everyone to flee. Even if they used their angel gene fluid, they couldn't outrun the fox. And not long after, the fox caught up with them. It swung its 3 tails and wrapped them around one person, electrifying him into charcoal. Han Sen and Little Angel caught up and pulled the fox away from the angel gene runaways. Zhao Xuebin and his people were currently in terror. Not wanting to stay and fight, they kept on running. The 3-tailed fox was savagely attacked by the tag team of Han Sen and Little Angel. All the while they descended the mountain. Although the 3-tailed fox was powerful, it didn't stand a chance against Han Sen and Little Angel. It wasn't long before its fur was painted red with blood. The foe would soon be vanquished. The fox acted as if it knew it was dying, and suddenly, it started running back up the hill towards the peak instead. Is this thing crazy? Why is it running back? Han Sen asked himself, in surprise. Mr. Han, kill it? Zhao Xuebin called back, as he watched the fox ascend the mountain again. Han Sen coldly replied, I won't kill it. This has nothing to do with you. You wanted the Thunderbull, right? All I saw up there was this thunderous fox, and it is my prey. After that, Han Sen ignored the terrified collective and brought Little Angel and Zero along with him in pursuit of the fox that was headed back up the mountain. After Han Sen chased the 3-tailed fox back to the mountaintop, the body of the bull had all disappeared. Not even the life geno essence remained. The silver fox was licking its lips happily. When the 3-tailed fox reached the peak, it howled. It ran in front of the silver fox and leaned down with its paws outstretched, as if it was begging for mercy. The silver fox observed the 3-tailed fox's bloodied tails and then leapt on its head, as if it was going to tell Han Sen, this guy belongs to me now. Be *starred. You ate the Thunderbull and didn't even save me the life geno essence. Now you are giving yourself a companion?
Han Sen loke dishet ned.
The silver fox spat out silver lightning to heal the 3-tailed fox. The 3-tailed fox trembled in fear, and in response, the silver fox looked smug. It jumped into Han Sen's arms and then rubbed its head against his chest, as if it was trying to tell him to forgive the 3-tailed fox. The 3-tailed fox seemed intelligent, and it knelt in front of Han Sen as if it wanted to obey him, too. I was going to feed it to you anyway. Keep it and spare the cannibalism. Then, Han Sen then pointed at the 3-tailed fox and said, Your name is 3-tail, you got it? Now, follow me. The 3-tailed fox was well behaved, and it quickly followed as ordered. Han Sen returned his beast souls, and with the silver fox in his arms and Zero behind him, they rode the 3-tailed fox down the mountain. Zhao Xuebin's people were now in a state of boredom, waiting. That soon changed when they saw the 3-tailed fox reappear, heading right for them again. Upon closer inspection, however, they noticed Han Sen and Zero were riding it. Seeing that menacing fox to be now ridden calmly, they were shocked. I couldn't find the bull, but look, I found a fox. Thanks for telling me to return to the peak. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten myself a new ride. Han Sen reclined on the fox's back and smiled at them. Their disbelief was marred by the ugly looks of anger. Their excursion looked set to have them returning empty-handed, since they had failed to slay their bull. Han Sen, on the other hand, was going to walk away far wealthier. It's a super creature. By the sanctuaries. How can it obey a human? Zhao Shuabin may have been angered, but he couldn't help but respect Han Sen for being able to tame a super creature like so. Now that I have the three-tailed fox, I can offer you protection from the lightning. I can lead you up to the peak, if you'd like. Do you fancy going? Han Sen gave the people his barmiest smile. Yes, please. Zhao Shuabin was still not quite ready to throw in the towel. Let's go, then. Han Sen rode the fox and led them up to the mountaintop. He did not make them suffer this time, and their travel was without hindrance. Only the thunder flower remained, and all traces of the bull had vanished. But seeing the thunder flower, Zhao Shuabin and his people became greedy again. We came here in search of the thunder bull, but alas, we could not find it. But this flower looks special. Do you think I can take this flower as a souvenir and gift it to my supervisor? He might like it. Zhao Shuabin made his request. It is not owned by anyone, and it belongs to any who chooses to take it, Han Sen said. Zhao Shuabin was surprised by Han Sen's words, but he quickly thought something was amiss. He had an unshakable feeling that Han Sen would never be so kind as to allow them to take something so unique. But a treasure had indeed been put before him, and he would do anything to own it. He thought about it for a bit, and then allowed Feng Lin to collect it, not daring to go himself. Feng Lin had similar thoughts to Zhao Shuabin, and was also afraid to approach the flower. Still, he had no choice but to obey the order he had been given. He approached the flower and then touched it. Gold lightning burst forth from the bud and electrocuted him. Zhao Shuabin was shocked, in a different way. He smiled at Han Sen and said, Mr. Han, the three-tailed fox you have can command thunder. May we request that it collect the flower on our behalf? Manager Zhao, do you think such a thing is possible?
Han Sen coldly sighed.
Zhao Shuabin said, Our contract was to kill the bull, but the bull is no longer here. Can we perhaps change the terms so it references us collecting this flower instead? A contract is a contract. You can't go changing it whenever you please. I came here to hunt this phantom bull of yours, and I have no concern for anything other than that. Han Sen was familiar with how obscene the Zhao family could be, so he wasn't too surprised by their absurd request. Zhao Shuabin obviously wanted to say something, but Han Sen turned around to leave. The people quickly remembered that the three-tailed fox was shielding them from the lightning. If they upset Han Sen, they thought he could very well allow it to electrocute them. Thinking of that, Zhao Shuabin kept his mouth closed and did not say anything more. Han Sen then led them down the mountain and returned to the mountaintop by himself again, so he could wait for the fruit to mature. Zhao Shuabin knew Han Sen was returning for the sole purpose of obtaining the flower for himself, but he also knew he was helpless to stop him. They had no choice but to pack up and go home. A day later, on the peak of Thunder Mountain, the fruit grew to the size of a fist. A lot of lightning continued striking the fruit, and there was a notable increase in the strength of its pleasant fragrance with each lightning strike. Countless booms of thunder rumbled over the fruit over the course of a day, and before long, it shone gold like a thunderbolt itself. The final thunderbolt hit the fruit, and after it did, the dark clouds of the sky dissipated. The wind and the rain stopped, and the only elemental threat that remained was the golden thunder fruit itself. The silver fox leapt out of Han Sen's arms, but did not rush to eat the fruit. It approached it, and then walked around it, as if it was contemplating something. After walking a few circles around it, the silver fox looked at Han Sen and then looked back at the fruit. It opened its mouth and swallowed it in one large mouthful. Boom! The golden lightning exploded inside the silver fox's tummy and burned his entire body, making him look like burnt wood. Han Sen was shocked and almost wanted to rush to its aid. But luckily, his Dongxian aura was able to detect its life force was actually getting stronger. He remained where he was and did not approach. From inside the silver fox's charred body, a gold light burst forth. The strength of the light gradually increased, and the brighter it got, the darker its body became. Soon after, the silver fox's body was like smoldering charcoal, with veins of red running along its black body. Suddenly, dark clouds reappeared, shadowing the land once more. A black bolt of thunder struck the now black fox. Catcha! The silver fox's body cracked. Catcha! Another black bolt came from the sky, and this happened a multitude of times. After the ninth occurrence, the clouds departed as quickly as they had come. Boom! A white lightning cloud then appeared in the sky, erupting with more bolts of thunder. They were all aimed at the silver fox's breaking body. After striking the fox 9 more times, this cloud also disappeared from wherever it came from. After that, the same thing happened again and again with 6 other clouds. Strangely, they were all of a different color. There were green, red, purple, blue, gold, and silver clouds, all in all. Each cloud hit the silver fox with a thunderbolt 9 times. And with each strike, the silver fox's body became stronger. But then, on the final strike, the silver fox's body was broken into pieces. Its flesh had hardened, only to shatter like bits of glass. Only its skeleton remained. The bones were shining with lightning. Boom! Another lightning bolt streaked across the sky. But this was like a pillar, heading directly downwards as if to crush the silver fox's motionless bones. Howl! The silver fox finally made a sound, but beneath the light of that holy pillar, the flesh of its prior composition began to return. The howl it made was sad enough to break someone's heart. When the fox first shattered, it did not make a noise, but it did when being reborn. The pain must have been far more excruciating. More and more lightning flashed across its rebirthing body, and slowly, the silver fox's new appearance was revealed. It was like a silver lightning fox, and now, it was bearing the crushing weight of the pillar of light. The silver lightning of the fox was like a fire, and when the silver fox howled, the fire pushed up against the pillar. Boom! The area was consumed by a grand discharge of electricity. Han Sen and the three-tailed fox had to move a great distance away and watch the transformation from afar. Boom! Perhaps it was because there was too much lightning, but half of Thunder Mountain collapsed, and amidst the ruin and rubble, the silver fox howled again. The silver lightning sundered the light pillar and went even further, lighting up the entire sky. Boom! The silver lightning broke the sky, literally cracking it open. Inside the cracks, Han Sen saw many strange things. Han Sen saw a palace and strange flora. He even saw a tree with an angel perched on one of its branches. From inside those cracks, a phantom force of pressure burst forth to push him down on the ground. His power still wasn't at a high enough level to resist that pressure. Howl! The silver fox looked at Han Sen and called out to him. Han Sen looked at the silver fox and their eyes locked onto each other. From what Han Sen could see in the silver fox's eyes, it was conflicted. Han Sen thought the silver fox was going to summon the gate to the third god's sanctuary like the holy rhino or empty which had. But it didn't take long for that assumption to change. The silver fox hadn't summoned a spirit. Instead, it had forced open a crack between both sanctuaries to force his way beyond. Howl! The silver fox looked up to the sky and the cracks began to reduce in size. Then, it looked back to Han Sen as if it was going to miss him. Little Silver, go. I'll find you. We'll be together again real soon. Han Sen did his best to stand up, but could not. He gathered all the power he could to generate sonic thunder powers. But even with that power, however, he could not make a squeak. The silver fox had evolved, and if it remained in the second god's sanctuary, its body would be tainted and end up in a far worse state than it currently was. It would have to leave this place before the cracks closed. Although Han Sen wanted to go with it, it was impossible for him to even budge. Howl! The silver fox yelped in the direction of its master once more, and as it inched itself towards the cracks, it made sure to keep looking back at Han Sen. I will look for you soon, Little Silver. Wait for me. Han Sen witnessed the cracks beginning to seal, and so he spoke aloud one last time to the silver fox that looked back at him. The silver fox nodded, and then it turned back to face the portal. Its body morphed into silver lightning and was drawn inside. Boom! The crack closed shut, and the pressure that had forced Han Sen to the ground vanished. Still, he did not immediately get back on his feet. His heart had been dealt a blow he had almost never had to deal with. Ever since he watched the birth of Little Silver, He had spent most of his time alongside it. It was a genuine companion, and now that it was gone, it hurt. Han Sen vowed to do whatever it took to find the silver fox again. But the third god's sanctuary was a massive, sprawling place. It was largely unexplored, and human development was slow there. Unless he was tremendously lucky, Han Sen feared it might take years for the two to reunite. F***CK. I know I shouldn't worry. I'll find him no matter where he ends up. I'll cut down anyone or anything that tries to stop me from reuniting with him. Han Sen was going to consider this an oath, a vow he would swear to uphold. Looking up to the sky, he shouted, "Little Silver, hold on. I'm going to look after you, no matter what it takes." After cheering himself up, he returned to the nearest human shelter and went back to the Alliance. In accordance with the contract, he returned half of the Angel Gene fluid to Angel Gene. He wouldn't play nice with those people ever. But before he hit the road again, he spoke to his mother and informed her of his plan. Han Sen was going to give her most of his beast souls and the super creatures he had claimed. It would have been even better if she could go to Moment Shelter, for if she did, he could move on to the third god's sanctuary without worry. If you visit the third god's sanctuary, do not let the spirits know that you have an association with the Luo family, Luo Lan said calmly after hearing his plans. Why? Han Sen asked, not understanding. Your great-grandfather was renowned for his cruelty in the third god's sanctuary. Every spirit there will hate him with a passion. If you don't want a perpetual bounty on your head, keep your familial tie to him a secret. But since you didn't learn the falsified Sky Sutra, that shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Luo Lang smiled.
This is bad. When Han Sen heard this, his heart jumped. He knew he'd have no problem keeping it a secret, but he was aware that the Zhao family hated him. He feared they would send word to the spirits of the third god's sanctuary about who Han Sen's ancestor was. Han Sen told Luo Lan the story of what had transpired between him and the Zhao family over time. And when Luo Lan heard this, she said, "The third god's sanctuary is enormous. There are few humans there, and lesser still are capable of traveling. Unless you are extremely unlucky and spawn near the Zhao family, you shouldn't have too many problems. And when you enter the third god's sanctuary, you are eligible for a name change. Even if they know you are out there in the third god's sanctuary someplace, they will only know your name. Your precise location will be unknown to them." Luo Lan did not seem to be worried at all. "I suppose you're right, Mom." Han Sen felt reassured with his mother's comfort. Luo Lan then said, "You don't have to come find me, by the way. I can travel to Moment Shelter by myself." "No, Mom. I should come and pick you up. It is too dangerous for you to venture there alone," Han Sen quickly responded. "You underestimate the talents of your mother. Just stick to doing your own thing. I'll be fine." Luo Lan gave another warm smile. Although Han Sen wanted her to wait for him, she insisted on going by herself. Knowing his mother's determination, Han Sen knew he'd have no choice but to accept, agree, and respect her decision. There was nothing he could do save speed up his own journey to visit her. The sooner he met her, the less danger she would have to face on her own. He knew she was powerful, but it was natural for him to worry over her well-being. Han Sen wasn't in much of a mood to kill any more creatures, so his journey there was defined by one thing, and one thing only: power walking. Unless he stumbled across a creature that could benefit his pets, he was too lazy to fight. After walking for an entire month, Han Sen came across a second-generation wolf king out on a moor. To get it, Han Sen had to slay its entire wolf pack. He didn't get a beast soul, but he was able to finally max out his Super Geno points. After another 3 months of walking, Han Sen finally met up with Luo Lan. They spent 4 months traveling back to Moment Shelter, where he let Luo Lan to handle the affairs of the shelter. Now, Han Sen could focus on moving up to the third god's sanctuary. Throughout his time on the road, Han Sen also spent time practicing his Blood Pulse Sutra. His body received a great many changes, and he was close to breaking its first gene lock. Han Sen planned on finishing the first tier and then becoming a surpasser. He also wanted to level up the fairy, too. She wouldn't listen to anyone but Han Sen, so he thought she'd only bring mischief if she was to remain in Moment Shelter without him. Han Sen was going to try and get her to the third god's sanctuary to avoid her being a nuisance in his absence. As for the three-tailed fox, Big Black, Smallback and Little White, they were all well-behaved. Even if Han Sen wasn't around, they would follow Luo Lan's commands. That, alongside the super beast souls he was going to give her, would guarantee that Luo Lan would have no problem keeping the shelter secure. Aside from Little Angel and his Devilant King armor, Meowth and Golden Growler, Han Sen gifted all of his beast souls to Luo Lan. Han Sen worried people might recognize the Devilant King armor that Dollar had used, and that's why he decided to bring it with him. After everything he had experienced so far, he knew his beast souls wouldn't be of much use in the third god's sanctuary. Even his shape-shifting silver blood macaque beast soul was useless to him now. It could boost him to a fitness level of 300, yes, but once he became a surpasser, his fitness level would reach 600. Han Sen's body wasn't weaker than the silver blood macaque. He had reached a fitness level of 300, but his king's spirit body did not activate. He thought it would most likely activate after he became a surpasser. So, Han Sen spent his time practicing with his Blood Pulse Sutra and taking the Crystal Palace out for deep-sea dives. Down there, he searched for water element super creatures to aid the fairy's development. Han Sen had a creature in mind, too, the blue seahorse. Unfortunately for him, however, it took him a long time to find it. He eventually did come across it, though, in the blackest depths of the sea. It had 2 little seahorses alongside it, and although Han Sen could have slain them all, he chose not to. It was difficult to produce second-generation super creatures, and since Han Sen did not need them anymore, he let them go. It turned out that the blue seahorse's element was fire. It was useless for the fairy. A year passed, and the fairy had still not evolved. But in that time, he had managed to open the first gene lock of the Blood Pulse Sutra. Surprisingly and disappointingly, the Blood Pulse Sutra was a bit of a letdown. It turned out to be weaker than he expected it to be. Aside from a simple strengthening of his body, it had no real utility. It was worse than the Dongxian Sutra and Jade Skin by a long shot. Does this sutra only affect your kin? Han Sen reviewed the Blood Pulse Sutra again, but felt as if there had been a mistake. It should have been far better than what he was seeing. Han Sen did feel as if his body had changed, though. Still, he couldn't pinpoint where or what exactly had changed. Half a month after this, Han Sen killed a water element monster. After the fairy ate its body and the life geno essence, she started to evolve. When Fairy evolved, she made a whirlpool in the water and turned into ice, freezing the Crystal Palace at the same time. The sanctuary door opened in the air, and a spirit walked out to approach Fairy. Unlike the silver fox, who was hesitant to leave, the fairy spared no time in accompanying the spirit. Gleefully, she raced straight towards it. Ungrateful be asterisk tc. Han Sen felt as if he had been used and cast aside. He felt as if his kindness had all been in vain. As this occurred, Han Sen was in the Crystal Palace. The spirit that came through the door did not see Han Sen when it took the fairy back across the gate. But before the fairy went beyond the gate, she made a mocking face towards the Crystal Palace. Fine, whatever. Go ahead. This place is better off without you.
Han Sen sighed.
Although he said that, he actually missed her. Now, the gourd was the next thing Han Sen could not let go of. He couldn't bring it with him, and neither was it birthing. Han Sen had tried everything, including feeding it a copious amount of super creature blood, but it no longer absorbed any. Han Sen had no clue how to get it open. If I am unable to find a way to bring you out of your shell, I am going to have to leave you here in the second god's sanctuary. Han Sen touched the gourd in his hand and spoke to it. He thought the situation with the gourd was unfair. He knew the gourd was a treasure, and it possessed the 6 cog armaments inside it. Leaving them behind in the second god's sanctuary would be a grand waste. If the silver fox was able to break the sky and go to the third god's sanctuary, does that mean I can use the same method to cross over? If I could, then I could at least take the gourd with me, Han Sen thought to himself. But Han Sen knew he needed the right timing to pull off something like that. He couldn't just tear the skies asunder willy-nilly. The silver fox had been in the right place at the right time. The little blighter ate the fruit, and that was the catalyst for its ascension. Right now, no matter how strong Han Sen had become, he could not break the fabric of the skies. For a human to break through the very atmosphere was almost unheard of, and not even demigods had been reported to have achieved such a feat. The only person Han Sen had heard of doing such a thing was the creator of the Dongxian Sutra, Dong Xuanzi. The silver fox's ascension seemed like bottled lightning, as in, it was a perfect storm of factors that led to it being able to access the third god's shelter. Han Sen was not in a rush to be a surpasser just yet, however. His 4-year service in the army would be over soon, and he planned on leveling up once he had finished his service. Although Ji Yinran repeatedly mentioned her desire for marriage after his service in the army was over, Han Sen kept on delaying it. He was afraid of accessing the third god's sanctuary and dying, leaving her a widow. Perhaps the Zhao family would not forget their feud and would manage to spread the rumor that he was actually from the Luo family. But even if that did not happen, the lotus symbol on his forehead still worried him. The Ji family was hoping, after Han Sen finished his term of service, he could be a military sergeant. With the Ji family's power, they could easily establish a career for him in the military. But Han Sen rejected their offers, wanting to retire and be free for a time. He wanted to go home and spend time with his mother and little sister, and then move on to the third god's sanctuary. On this day, Han Sen felt a vibration stemming from his sea of soul. The Aqua Reaper beast's soul died, and then disappeared. It looks like he escaped. Han Sen wore a complicated expression, but he was not surprised. Ningyu was no ordinary person. He had been possessed by the Aqua Reaper, but still, he had never passed on any useful information. It was only a matter of time until he managed to escape it. That being said, Han Sen had thought he would have escaped sooner. There had not been much important news in the alliance recently. The Zhao family was still a favored name, but their production of high-class angel gene fluid was slowly winding down. Dong Lin's pet pills, on the other hand, had started to receive more good feedback. Their prices began to rise in response to the growing demand, and in time, it was wagered they could compete against angel gene fluid. The pet pills Han Sen and Ji Ruojian bought were purchased at a good time, and had they wanted the same quantity now, it would have cost them a dozen times more. Crazier yet, the prices were still on an upward trajectory. It was difficult to purchase large quantities of the pet pills these days. Dong Lin's production was not enough to serve and meet the demand of the alliance. The people of the Ji family, who did not invest in the pills when it was first suggested to them by Ji Ruojian, were regretting their mistake deeply. After retiring, Han Sen went to Roca Planet and stayed at home for some time. He spent a few days with his mother and little sister, and then spent time with Zhang Danfeng. He did whatever he wanted to, in addition to researching what he could about the third god's sanctuary. Going there would be difficult, and even Han Sen's mother was not confident she herself could survive there. That was why she never chose to become a surpasser. Although Han Sen's chances of survival were better than most, all it would take was an unlucky roll of the dice to twist his fate. If he ended up in a high-level spirit shelter where the spirit despised him, he'd be killed without trouble. There'd be nothing he could do to escape such a fate. Han Sen enjoyed the days of relaxation as best as he could. He had a lion most days, and it was freeing for him not to worry about training or hunting more super creatures. For once he had true peace of mind. He frequently spent time practicing with little Yin, too. She had developed into a pretty young girl now, and in 3 years, she'd enter the first god's sanctuary. With Han Sen's reputation, it did not matter where she ended up. She'd be taken good care of. There was no need for Han Sen to worry about her well-being as much as he once had. He saw a lot of himself in little Yin. She was very independent and strong, the clear result of having been raised by a single mother. Without someone taking care of her, she could still survive and most likely thrive. But little Yin was just a girl, and that was a different than Han Senator. It would be better if someone could take care of her, because Han Sen didn't want her to suffer. Han Sen did go back to the sanctuary, every now and then, to check on his gourd. It looked the same as it always did, and there was no sign of it changing. Han Sen stayed at his home for a month, and when he went back to the sanctuary, he went to visit the evolution pool. He stood next to it and removed his clothes. With the gourd in hand, he jumped in. He did not know if the pool could work for the gourd, but there was no harm in trying. Han Sen really wanted to bring the gourd with him, because if he didn't, he'd lose all the astounding weapons that were inside it. Heaven knew who would end up owning them one day. The evolution pool was like an endless, aquatic abyss. It was like a black hole. Han Sen's body continued to fall, as if he was being dropped into a bottomless vacuum. The composition of his body began to melt away as his flesh decomposed. Han Sen did not feel any pain, and he could not see or hear anything. It felt as if his body was being reborn. It felt as if he was in purgatory, soon to be graced with a new life. Evolution successful. You have achieved the rank of Surpasser. You have gained an additional 100-year lifespan. Your super body has evolved. Super King Spirit. Han Sen. Super Body, Super King Spirit. Title, Surpasser. Lifespan, 400. Next evolution requirement, 100 Geno points. Own Geno points, 0. Han Sen was pushed to the surface of the water as he heard the announcement, informing him of his success in evolving. Before Han Sen could admire his new Surpasser body, however, he felt his left hand becoming overwhelmed by a pulsing power. The gourd in his left hand was vibrating like mad. The gourd was trembling in Han Sen's hand. At its tip, a black hole-like distortion had manifested, warping the very dimension around it. Is something going to be born from the gourd now? Did the evolution pool really help it? Han Sen was excited, looking at the gourd. While he was thinking, a black light burst forth from the gourd to sunder the atmosphere like a blade. A lesion was torn in the fabric of space, and a powerful force of suction came from it. Before he could react, Han Sen and the gourd were both sucked inside. Boom! Han Sen felt as if the world was spinning, or as if he had been tossed into a tumble dryer. He felt a crushing force descend upon him, and amidst his rolling, he felt as if he wanted to throw up but could not. He wanted to scream, but no voice came out. He felt his body being forced into the painful, compact shape of a ball. Time did not seem to exist in the place he had ended up, and the pain he suffered felt as if it had lasted an entire century, despite truly lasting only a few seconds. Pang! Han Sen was suddenly released from that agonizing pain, and he was dropped to the cold comfort of the ground. After the fall, he could not help but yell, "Ouch!" His body was in anguish, and when he moved, he could feel a number of broken bones about his body, in addition to his torn organs. A slight movement was all it took to make him feel as if 1,000 knives were stabbing him all at once. It was fortunate Han Sen was as powerful as he was. Any ordinary surpasser would have died at first contact with this place. Han Sen wanted to cast his Dongshin Sutra to simulate the holy light and heal himself, but he couldn't. The blood flow of his entire body was messed up, and he was unable to cast a single skill. Oh no, am I going to die like this? Han Sen felt as if his organs were bleeding. His entire body had been battered and broken, and if he did not receive any remedial aid, he'd soon die. Being unable to cast a single skill, he could not heal himself. And with the pain that came with moving, he couldn't do anything but wait to die. Gourd, you got me killed. Han Sen spoke to the gourd beside him as his heart sank. But then, Han Sen realized that despite all the wounds he had incurred and the lesions that had opened up across his body, he wasn't bleeding externally. All the wounds had scabbed. And as for the internal bleeding he could feel, nothing ill was coming of it. The blood that came from the organs did not swell up someplace, but instead managed to flow around his body even without the pumping of his heart or blood vessels. Blood Pulse Sutra? Han Sen was delighted at the sudden realization, and so he cast it. As he did, he prayed and hoped, this must work. He easily cast the Blood Pulse Sutra, and his messed-up interior did not seem to prohibit his usage of the skill. A strange power burst from his blood and went to every cell, fixing and restoring every part of his body. His organs, his bones, his torn flesh. Every inch of his being was recovering. Han Sen noticed he did not need to focus on the Blood Pulse Sutra, as the energy from his blood was recovering his organs by itself. No wonder it is a Blood Legion skill. It really is quite powerful. Han Sen was very happy. Although the recovery of the sutra was slow, and it wasn't as fast or efficient as the Holy Light, it was enough to save his life under the dire circumstances. It would take a while before he fully recovered, so he made the most of it and laid down as comfortably as he could. Han Sen now thought it was a good idea to look around, but unfortunately, he could not move his head. Therefore, His vision was limited. The air was pure where he was, and he had a feeling that he had never felt during his time in the second god's sanctuary. In comparison, the second god's sanctuary's air quality seemed poor and dirty. Am I in the third god's sanctuary? As Han Sen thought this, he tried looking up. All he could see was the color green. When the sunlight flickered down through the foliage in his sight, the graceful light blinded him. Han Sen noticed he was beneath a tree that was around 5 meters tall, and its leaves were entirely circular. The leaves knitted together like a parasol, shielding him from the sun rays. But from the branches, Han Sen noticed many crosses hanging down. As Han Sen wondered who had hung so many crosses on the tree, he realized what they actually were. They were short swords. Every short sword looked identical, and they were about 2 feet long. Each blade was approximately the width of 2 fingers, and they were pitch black in color. That was why Han Sen first mistook them for crosses. All in all, there had to be around 30 of them. Who was bored enough to hang this many swords from the tree? Although Han Sen had this thought, he was actually extremely happy. It also meant someone had to be someplace in the vicinity. But then, Han Sen realized it might have been a spirit that did this. Spirits were, after all, renowned for doing weird things. If he was discovered by a spirit, he wagered no good would come of it. But Han Sen could not look around and examine more of the surroundings, due to his inability to move his head. All he could see was the tree and the black short swords. Han Sen then noticed something was wrong. The short swords didn't look as if they had been hung on purpose. The swords were connected with the branches, as if they were a sort of fruit. Genoseeds. This must be the third god's sanctuary. Han Sen realized he was beneath a Geno tree. The black short swords were Geno weaponry. He didn't know if he ought to be glad or worried. In this place, spirits, creatures, and humans grew Geno seeds, and now, he was directly underneath the fruit of one. He wasn't sure what he was going to meet. If the Geno tree's master was a beast, Han Sen would likely become its afternoon snack, since he couldn't move. Han Sen looked at his Sea of Soul, planning to don his Devil Ant King armor for protection. But when he looked inside there, he froze. The black crystal in the Sea of Soul was like a black hole, absorbing the life force around it. Han Sen was shocked. Ever since he found the black crystal, there hadn't been anything amiss with it. But now, the black crystal was absorbing life forces, and it was quite terrifying to see. The speed at which the black crystal was absorbing the life forces was alarming, and if its hunger was turned to Han Sen later, he'd be a skeletal husk in under a minute. Any other evolver would perish instantly. Han Sen was rather concerned. If the crystal had hungered for him when he ate it previously, he'd have died a very long time ago. The black crystal kept absorbing life force, but Han Sen realized he did not know where the life force was coming from. The black crystal spent quite some time absorbing it. Han Sen was afraid the black crystal would absorb his life force, but there was nothing he could do. He could not remove it from his body. He opened his eyes, wanting to look around and see where that life force was originating, for he did not believe the life force of the atmosphere itself was that powerful. But Han Sen could not move his head. All he could see was the tree above him, which grew black short swords. When he looked at the tree again, however, he was given a surprise. The tree, once a rich emerald, had yellowed. The black short swords had lost their luster and attractive shininess and had now started to rust. The black crystal is absorbing the life force of the tree. Han Sen was gobsmacked, unsure of how the crystal was doing it. But for Han Sen, this was good news. It showed that the black crystal was not interested in humans, just flora. Still, he was a little apprehensive. The black crystal might not be interested in him now, but who could promise that it wouldn't like a taste of him later? Perhaps the black crystal believed he was too weak right now, and it was going to wait until he became stronger before chowing down on his energy. Catcha! The sword tree was getting more and more yellow, and its trunk was starting to rot. Many leaves departed their harboring branches, and the tree's grip on the swords became weaker. One of them dropped dangerously close to Han's senator. It nicked his face right before sinking into the ground. He almost had a heart attack. Seeing the many swords rusting and preparing to drop at any second, Han Sen planned on summoning Little Angel to carry him away. The last thing he wanted was to get impaled by one of those rusty blades. But when he tried to summon her, he got no response. He looked back into the Sea of Soul, and for some reason, little Angel was little more than a light. He had no idea when this had begun, but there she was, evolving. Strange? How can she evolve? I didn't feed her a black crystal or anything. Han Sen pondered the conundrum, but still believed it to be a good thing. When little Angel evolved, his life in the third god's sanctuary was sure to be substantially easier. I don't think little Angel can be summoned right now, then. Looking at his collection of beast souls now, he was almost dismayed to only see Meowth and Golden Growler there. The only spirit Han Sen brought with him was Moment Queen, but she was less than favorably inclined towards him, so he did not believe she could help. As Han Sen continued to think, the black crystal eventually stopped. He looked at the black crystal and found there to be some sort of liquid around it. There was no color or smell to the substance, and it was translucent like an actual crystal. Strangely, it possessed a life force of its own. Strange. Did the black crystal bite off more than it could chew? Is this a secretion stemming from an overload?
Han Sen wondered.
But the life force had become a water in the Sea of Soul. Han Sen could not drink it, but if he possibly could, he'd have liked to consume it and see if it could benefit his body in any capacity. For some reason, he decided to let Meowth have it. He wanted to see if it'd benefit Meowth first. Meowth curiously licked it, but did not dare consume it properly. It was too strong for Meowth, and even after the casual lick, its body bloated with energy. If Meowth had actually consumed it all, it would have undoubtedly exploded. Han Sen then let Golden Growler try it. He too licked it at first, and his body was filled to the brim with energy. This is good, but Golden Growler and Meowth are from the first god's sanctuary. I don't think they can cope with this much energy. I'm unsure of the benefits it may impart then. Han Sen looked at Golden Growler and Meowth that were gasping in an attempt to digest the energy they had just accepted. Han Sen focused his vision forward and noticed that the tree was completely dead. All the swords had dropped to the ground and all the leaves had left the branches. It had no more life force, which had evidently all been sucked dry by the black crystal. No wonder it stopped. It's bone dry. Han Sen observed the dead tree and then heard a voice. Sister Lanchi, the ink sword tree that has been growing for 3 years is about to mature. There are 34 of them growing. Think of the riches. We can sell them to obtain a large amount of ordinary flesh. A man was talking excitedly. When Han Sen heard what he had to say, his face dropped. Oh, crap. This tree was owned by someone else. But who does it belong to? A human or spirit? If it's a spirit, I am so dead. Han Sen wanted to get up and run, but alas, he could not. Even if Han Sen summoned his Golden Growler in the third god's sanctuary, it would be slower than an average creature. It seemed like an escape would be impossible. All Han Sen could do was hope that the owner of the tree was human, and if it was, he could pay the owner back in the alliance. Yeah, the flesh should give us a lot of ordinary Geno points. A woman now replied to the man, and although she was quieter, there was audible excitement coating her voice. Oh, by the sanctuaries. I hope they won't be too mad when they see the tree.
Han Sen felt terrible.
They sounded human, but the tree was clearly important to them. Han Sen could now only continue praying for divine protection over whatever was about to happen next. Chu Lanchi and Chu Ming were engaged in merry conversation as they walked, but that soon came to an end when they entered the field and caught sight of their inksword tree. They had spent the last 3 years cultivating it, and in a few more days, they'd have been able to harvest the 34 ordinary gene weapons. But now, the tree had suddenly died. It had once borne an abundance of emerald leaves, but now only a few yellow leaves remained stubbornly clinging to its withered branches. The ink swords that once inhabited the tree had all disappeared, too. Mounds of dead leaves and rusted blades were all that remained, scattered about. How did that happen? Chu Ming ran in front of the inksword tree, digging through the leaves like mad. He grabbed one of the rusted swords that had broken in half, following its fall. Chu Lanchi's face was robbed of all its color. The last 3 years of her effort had been squandered overnight. She wouldn't receive any of the fruits of her labor, so her heart and mood were swiftly crushed. Someone is here. and he looks injured. Chu Lanqi ran in front of the tree, looking at Han Sen as she came. A person? Chu Ming was vacant-minded when he asked, unsure of how to respond to the tree's death. He looked over to where Chu Lanqi was pointing and saw a man lying on the ground. Chu Ming quickly ran over to him, grabbed him by the collar, and shouted with great anger, "Did you destroy our inksword tree?" Blurg. When Han Sen was grabbed and shaken by the angry shouting man, his organs were injured. He tried to speak, but could only spill blood from his mouth. "Did you do it? Answer me. Did you ruin our tree?" Chu Ming continued to shout. Shaking Han Senator, the tree's death had really thrown him for a loop. "Are you crazy? Don't you see how injured he is? What, do you want to kill him?" Chu Lanqi pulled Chu Ming away from Han Sen and then knelt down to inspect him. "Lanqi, this man has just randomly appeared in our garden on the same day our tree happens to be ruined. Put 2 and 2 together, would you? He is obviously responsible for this." Chu Ming was consumed with madness. "Chill out. Ask him politely first. He's human, a friend, at that. I don't think he'd try to harm us on purpose," Chu Lanqi said as she checked out Han Sen.
But
Chu Ming tried to say something, but fell short. Chu Lanqi shook her head and said, "Ask him later. Right now, he is far too injured. Let's help him recover first. You can ask all the questions you desire later." Chu Lanqi then summoned a turtle and told Chu Ming to help lift Han Sen and place him on the turtle's back. After that, they would depart the garden. Chu Ming was struggling to accept the death of the tree, and he was fuming mad at the likely culprit. Still, he was willing to oblige her request, and he lifted Han Sen onto the turtle. Then, they returned to a wooden cabin that was not too far from the tree. Chu Lanqi brought over some medicine and applied it to Han Sen's body. The medicine was intended for fixing simple things. "He's too injured. We need a doctor."
Que l'anxifrauned.
"Doctor? This Yahoo might have killed our inksword tree. Who cares if he's injured? Why should we fix him on our penny? We spent everything we had on that tree and toiled to nurture it for 3 years, with the dream that we'd live a better life once its fruit matured. But now, it's all gone. Where am I supposed to get that money now, huh?" Chu Ming was furious. Chu Lanqi understood where he was coming from, but she was conflicted with the desire to help the injured man. She didn't know how to respond. "I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine in a few days." After the rest, Han Sen was feeling a little bit better, and his voice had now returned to him. "Oh, so you can talk now? That's great news. Hey, tell me something here. Did you destroy my tree? And if you did, why?" Chu Ming was keen to begin his interrogation. "Don't hurt him." Chu Lanqi stopped Chu Ming, and then looked at Han Sen and asked, "Who are you, injured one? And why were you in our garden?" Han Sen sighed and said, "My name is San Mu. I was attacked by a creature and ran this way. I saw the tree fall victim to that putrid beast, and I believe that is what caused it to die. It is my fault, though. Do not worry. I will accept full responsibility and be sure to pay you back in full." You have wealth? And you're willing to pay us back? Well, all right then. 1 ink sword's price is equal to that of a portion of ordinary creature flesh. We had 34 swords in total, so give me the flesh of 34 ordinary creatures. Do that, and I'll let you off the hook so you can sod off back to where you came from, Chu Ming said. "Don't worry, a San always pays his debts. As soon as I'm back on my feet, I'll get to work on paying you back." After a brief pause, Han Sen continued to say, "Is there a shelter nearby in which I could teleport back to the Alliance?" The Blood Pulse Sutra could fix him, but it was too slow. If he could return to the Alliance, he could heal at a much quicker rate. When Chu Ming heard Han Sen was willing to pay him back, his mood had considerably brightened. He said, "You are joking? Haha, what a joker. The spirit won't let us go back." Chu Lanqi looked at Han Sen and asked, "San Mu, which shelter do you come from? And which creature did you encounter?" "Pa, where else could he have come from, girl? He most likely came from the Thorn Forest. What other place has sordid creatures in these parts, eh?"
Chu Ming interject.
Han Sen sighed in relief.
He believed Chu Ming to be the biggest idiot he had met in a long time. With that information, making a story wouldn't be so hard. "Yes, you're right. but I haven't been in the third god's sanctuary long. I am unfamiliar with this area. Han Sen suddenly coughed up some blood.
Ôi,
Don't die yet. You owe us money, remember? Chu Ming was a little repulsed. Chu Ming then thought something had to be amiss. He stared at Han Sen and said, Wait, if you only just entered the third god's forest, where are you going to find us ordinary flesh? Well, can I pay you back in the alliance?
Han Sen asked.
We can't leave this place, so what would be the point? Chu Ming suddenly felt the clouds of doom return to fog the clarity of his mind and said, Oh, no.
no,
No. This guy can't pay us. He can't pay us. Chu Lanchi sighed and then said, Well, let's just focus on fixing him first. No, you asterisk shoal. Give me my tree back. Chu Ming's mind returned to the 3 years he spent carefully tending to the tree. He looked like a broken man. Chu Lanchi stopped him and said, What would be the point in killing him? When he is healed, perhaps he can pay us back some other way. Geez, calm down, you two. I will pay you back. Han Sen couldn't blame them for their reactions, and he could tell they must have endured a difficult life where they were. Having a 3-year dream taken away from you was something no one could take very well, so Han Sen could understand their anger. But Han Sen was confident he could get better, and once his health returned, paying them back would not be too difficult. All he was unsure about was how to adequately return the favor they did by saving his life, despite the trouble he had caused them. Han Sen rested at their cabin for a few more days, and although he hadn't fully recovered, he could now walk around. Han Sen had suffered tremendous injuries, and because there were no medical tools in the vicinity, he had to rely on simple medicine and the blood pulse sutra for healing. He wagered it would take another 2 whole months before he was back to a clean bill of health. Over the past few days, Han Sen was able to obtain some information about the area he had ended up in from Chu Ming and Chu Lanchi. The area belonged to Thorn Shelter. It was a royal shelter, and its namesake was derived from the nearby woodland, Thorn Forest. Han Sen had ended up at the edge of Thorn Forest, near a night-class shelter called Qingming Shelter. They were the only humans at Qingming Shelter. Chu Lanchi had been living there for 8 years, whereas Chu Ming had been there for 6 years. They belonged to Qingming Shelter. The night-class spirit, Qingming Night, made them sign a contract. Then, they became members of the shelter, and the shelter's master offered them a chance to survive by working for him. Humans were the peasants of this land, treated like thralls, and treated even more poorly than creatures. After all, humans who ascended to this sanctuary would generally start off weaker than the lowliest of creatures. They had no chance of competing against a spirit. There were squire-class spirits in Qingming Shelter, and although some of them were weaker than humans, for as long as their spirit stone remained in the spirit shelter, they could fight without fear of death. As such, their bravery in combat was unmatched. Therefore, humans were considered peasants, particularly those who had just joined. When contracted, all they could be expected to do was hard, menial labor. Growing genoseeds was one such task. Chu Lanchi and Chu Ming had been sent to a garden to grow such seeds, and to avoid the cruel punishment of Qingming Night, they would had a quota of produce to deliver. It was tough in the beginning, but fortunately, Qingming Night did not require much, and any bonuses they produced could be kept for themselves. For the first few years, when they did not have much experience, times were tough. Their punishments came often, but after getting a grip on things and learning to grow the seeds effectively, they had much produce left over. As a result, they were able to save up what they wanted. 3 years ago, they pooled all of their savings together to purchase an ordinary inksword tree seed. Over the next 3 years, they labored to grow it and spent even more on its healthy cultivation. They would have been able to harvest its swords in a matter of days, but before that, Han Sen showed up and ruined all they had slaved to accomplish. Growing genoseeds was not easy, and their level was important. You needed a lot of resources and spare time to grow and care for them. Inksword trees had to be watered with black scale blood. With that, the tree would grow healthily. When they first planted the genoseed, they had to bury the bodies of black scale beasts near it. Their corpses would provide the necessary nutrients for its initial growth. Black scale beasts were only ordinary creatures, but obtaining a bucket of their blood every day was a trial and a half for them. After all, Qingming Shelter's creatures mostly belonged to Qingming Night. They could not kill black scale beasts randomly. Instead, they had to trade for the blood and flesh. If they wanted to hunt creatures, they would have to venture into Thorn Forest. But that territory was home to the most rancid of monsters. With their power, any encounter with a beast from that place would be dangerous. Even mutant creatures were known to live there. They thought by growing an inksword tree, their lives would become considerably easier. They never expected the disaster that awaited them following Han Sen's arrival. This was also why Chu Ming was never nice to Han Senator after all. Han Sen had just crushed their hopes and dreams. Han Sen was remorseful and did feel very sorry for what he had inadvertently done, but there was not much he could do. He never expected the black crystal to suddenly start absorbing the tree's life force. Han Sen got out of bed this day and went outside to sunbathe. The yard was skirted by a wooden fence, and Lan Chi said that the house once belonged to an old spirit. The spirit used to be in charge, but after he passed away, Qing Ming gave it to Lan Chi. Chu Lanchi and Chu Ming were both toiling in the garden that day. Although the sword tree had been destroyed, there were many other trees they had to take care of. Of course, the rest they grew were only enough to keep them going and allow them to live hand to mouth. They wouldn't provide the benefits that the inksword tree would have. Han Sen, in his observation of the yard, did not see a chair he could recline on, but he did see an old crooked tree, bent low near the ground. He was able to sit down there. Han Sen approached the crooked tree and sat on its branch. He had been cooped up in the house for far too long, so his opportunity to sunbathe felt extra good. The tree looked solid and was dark red in color, but the tree had no leaves, and it looked bald and dead. As Han Sen sunbathed, he tried casting Dongxian aura. If he could simulate the holy light, he could heal faster. But when he tried to cast it, he was unable to. His body and the energy inside him was too much of a mess. Although he might not have been able to cast skills, his general senses had recovered quite a bit. He sat down on the tree and felt a small life force stemming from the tree's root. It was very faint, though. It was too weak and looked likely to die soon. But Han Sen felt that the tree's life force was special. Was this tree grown by a genoseed? Han Sen wondered, as he brushed the tree root with his fingers. This is the dragon blood old tree. It grew from mutant class seeds. The old spirit that used to live here wanted to grow this tree, and to do so, he had to venture into Thorn Forest to collect the necessary nutrients for it. Unfortunately, he perished someplace within that perilous, knotted domain. A few days following his demise, the tree died too. Chu Lanchi approached and told Han Sen, "This is a mutant geno tree?" Han Sen said, as he looked at the old tree. "Yes. If we could tend and cultivate it successfully, we should be able to grow dragon blood fruit. They bear mutant class pet bee souls, called dragon blood snakes. They could all be sold for riches," Chu Lanchi said. "Selling just one of those would make us rich." Chu Lanchi paused for a brief while before continuing, "But such thoughts are pointless, even if the tree was alive. It requires the blood of ordinary beasts, each and every day. I have heard that the blood of blood-scale snakes is the most beneficial, but unfortunately, Qingming Shelter does not possess any such snakes. The old spirit that once lived here perished in the Thorn Forest in search of them." "That is a shame," Han Sen said, feeling sorry in his heart. "Even if such blood was available for sale, we couldn't afford it." "This tree is a lost cause on us," Chu Lanchi said. Han Sen smiled and looked at her. She was an elegant woman. Although she was not stunning, she was beautiful and fair. Her appearance was delicate and comforting, and her company was something many people would want for. Even amidst such dreary circumstances, she looked after herself well and kept herself tidy and neat. Even though the color of her clothes had long since faded, she didn't look ragged. Despite her apparel and surrounding environment, she looked natural and fair. She might not have been the prettiest woman to look at, but she had an inviting appeal. She exuded a sense of comfort, and Han Sen found himself quite attracted to her. "Where is Chu Ming?" Han Sen looked past her, but did not see him. "He went to buy food in the shelter. He'll be back soon." She then observed Han Sen with a stare, and went on to say, "Your wounds have healed quickly. My hypergeno art can heal." Han Sen had a prepared response for her curiosity. He had healed almost too quickly. His body had been broken, with organs damaged and bones snapped. Yet, after but a few days, he was back on his feet. No one would believe he had healed this quickly via natural means. Healing powers? You can heal people? Chu Lanqi asked Han Sen with shock. If I am fully recovered, I can impart healings on others. But that would depend on who or what. While it is fairly strong, I don't imagine my healing ability would prove sufficient for a wounded super creature, Han Sen said, modestly. It is rare to find people who can heal others of the same tier. When you have recovered, you might be able to find a job over on the ranch. Healing abilities are cherished at such a place, so you'd be paid handsomely, Chu Lanqi told Han Sen. Han Sen was interested in this prospect, so he asked, Ranch? What ranch? Well, it's more of a coliseum, really. Spirits trap creatures that are unable to be tamed and pit them against each other, for the entertainment of humans. Chu Lanqi sounded as if she did not think fondly of such venues. After her brief explanation, she returned to the house and tidied up. Han Sen remained near the dragon blood tree, evaluating what his next move should be. With his power, he should have been able to kill ordinary creatures without any hassle. But now that he had learnt the creatures of this area were owned, he couldn't kill as freely as he might have wanted to. Heading to Thorn Forest would be too dangerous in his current condition, as well, and if he ended up squaring off against a mutant creature, he could very well be killed. Han Sen had thought repaying the debt would be a trivial task, but there were a few complications involved that would make it much harder than he initially thought. Oh, black crystal. Why would you absorb the life force of that inksword tree? Why oh why, troublesome black crystal? You used to be quite helpful, so why are you working against all of us here? Han Sen was a little upset over his predicament. As these feelings of sadness came over him, he felt the black crystal in the sea of soul tremble. One of the bountiful water drops it had excreted earlier now exited the sea of soul and dropped onto the root of the tree. Han Sen was shocked at this sudden turn of events. He witnessed the dying, crooked tree absorb the water drop without delay, and almost immediately, the weakened life force of the tree was ignited. It was coming back to life. Han Sen's mood made a quick turnaround, and he exclaimed to himself, "These water drops can raise old, dead wood back to life?" The tree didn't recover its life immediately, however. It was still slowly absorbing the water drop. As Han Sen observed the tree, Chu Ming returned home with a filled sack. Seeing Han Sen sunbathing near the old tree, he was quickly brought to anger. He marched forward and said, "How unfortunate it was for us to meet you. You destroyed our inksword tree, and to top it off, we have to babysit and feed you. I'm warning you. You better get well soon and pay us back. Stop yelling and come in for lunch." Chu Lanqi had prepared food and called them both in to eat. Chu Ming frequently complained to Han Sen, but Han Sen understood why and thought it was reasonable. But now, Han Sen was curious about what state the old tree would soon be in after receiving the water drop. If all was successful, and it was indeed brought back to life, it'd be a mutant geno tree. The dragon blood fruit could be sold for a high price, solving all the problems Han Sen currently had. The black crystal's water drops were incredibly powerful. If it could continue producing such water drops, they provide Han Sen a lot of help in the times to come. Han Sen did not know what it took to produce those water drops. All he knew was that the black crystal absorbed the life force of the inksword tree and was able to produce 3 such water drops. 3 water drops for a tree that had been growing for 3 years. Is that a coincidence? Han Sen thought to himself. After eating lunch, Chu Lanqi went back to working in the yard. Han Sen returned to the tree and watched for any further changes intently. Although it was slow, Han Sen could feel the tree greasing the cogs of its existence. Slowly but surely, it was coming back to life. He wasn't sure when it'd be back to full health, but he did indeed feel it coming. The next day, Han Sen woke up on the wooden board he had been given for a mattress. He woke up to the sound of Chu Ming shouting, "Lanqi, come out and take a look. The dragon blood tree is growing." "Chu Ming, it is too early for jokes. Go get washed and get ready for work," Chu Lanqi said as she walked outside in her misty-eyed haze. She glimpsed the dragon blood tree, and her mouth dropped. "You weren't joking. How in the sanctuaries did the dragon blood tree spring back to life?" She ran in front of the tree and noticed the presence of small, newly sprouted leaves adorning the branches of the tree. Although there weren't many leaves, the significance of the new ones that had appeared was astounding, and it heralded the fact that the tree was not truly dead. If it was alive, that meant it could grow. If it could grow, it'd have a chance of bearing fruit. Han Sen exited the house and saw the tree's overnight developments. He sensed the life force and felt the bounty of energy that had returned to it. Chu Lanqi and Chu Ming were in the middle of exuberant joy, extremely excited over the prospects of the tree's revival. Han Sen walked in front of the tree and touched its trunk. He wanted to examine the life force with greater accuracy, and when he did, he frowned. The tree had been revived enough for it to come to life and spawn leaves, but it had absorbed every ounce of energy the water drop had given to it. The energy would not be enough for the tree to produce fruit. It took normal Geno seeds a few months to grow harvestable fruit, but ordinary Geno seeds took 1 to 10 years. Han Sen feared mutant Geno seeds might take 100 years to grow, and the old spirit had already been growing it for 90 years when he perished and it came into the possession of Chu Lanqi and Chu Ming. It could very well take another 10 years for the fruit to develop. Having this tree alive and not growing fruit would be useless, though. 2 days later, the tree had fully come to life. It looked like it was going to fully regrow. Another 2 days passed, and on that day, they noticed the leaves start to lose their color and turn yellow. Oh no, why is it dying again? Chu Ming asked in saddened shock. Chu Lanqi, with a wry smile, said, I don't even know why it came back to life in the first place. But I suppose without the proper nutrition it needs, its death ought to have been expected. Unless we can find the blood of blood-scale snakes, it'll just wither and die again. Chu Ming heard this and was upset. He exhaled like a leaking balloon. This is an empty happiness. But where might we find the blood of blood-scale snakes? The old spirit was a knight-class spirit and was almost as strong as Qingming Knight. Yet, on his venture into the thorn forest, he died. It'd be nothing more than suicide for us to voyage into that wretched tangle of overgrown shrubbery. Chu Lanqi, who was equally upset, said, I have heard that a veil of darkness shrouds Thorn Forest. They say an evil presides there, one that moves unseen. Qingming Knight himself would never dare venture there. The old spirit's death there is quite telling, and he never traveled much further than its outskirts. Chu Ming nodded and said, I have heard murmurs that coincide with what you speak of. Any spirit that enters there is killed, and their spirit stones somehow self-destruct immediately after. They both looked very depressed, contemplating these matters. Going to Thorn Forest to slay blood-scale snakes was not a wise course of action. They lacked the power to compete with that domain's mysterious monsters. When the mutant Geno seed tree sprang back to life, it delighted them to witness its rebirth. Now, they could do naught but watch it wither. They had to watch it perish alongside their newfound hopes and dreams for fruit that would allow them to escape their current poverty. They felt terrible. Han Sen suddenly interrupted them and said, I know a thing or two about restoring trees. Would you like to give my methods a try? Chu Ming immediately rejected Han Sen by saying, No.
No. No. No.
Do not mess things up any further. You have only just arrived in the third god's sanctuary, so how would you know about Geno trees? Do you think these are akin to your finely trimmed hedges in the Alliance? Do you think you can sprinkle some tap water on the tree, and everything will be fine and it'll grow? Chu Lanqi was more composed, and she instead simply asked, Do you really know how to help us with this? Han Sen answered, I have learnt much about botany from a certain professor I used to know. Of course, I was taught these methods back in the first god's sanctuary. I am unsure whether or not these methods can be applied to successful results in this place. Provided you don't have any other methods you'd like to use first, would you like to try mine? Which botany professor did you learn these things from?
Que l'anxiasked. Professor Sun Minghua, Han Sen ansvared.
When he protected Sun Minghua, he actually only learned how to identify plants. He wasn't taught anything about growing trees. Han Sen used this reasoning as a guise, so he could apply another water drop from his black crystal onto the tree. Professor Sun? He is a respectable teacher. I didn't know he accepted students. I just thought he was a lecturer. Chu Lanqi, knowing about the professor, looked at Han Sen in shock. Han Sen waved his hand and said, "Oh, I wasn't his student. I just learn a thing or two off him, every now and again." Chu Lanchi did not ask any further questions, but just pointed at the tree and told Han Sen, "Well, take a good look. Are there any other ways we might keep it alive, without having to feed it the blood of blood-scale snakes? We don't require that it grow fruit, and just keeping it alive would be more than enough." "Pa, you really believe in this Yahoo? Look, it needs beast blood to grow. End of story. Nothing else will make it grow," Chu Ming rebutted. "But we're out of options, so let's allow Sanmu to try what he can," Chu Lanchi said. Han Sen walked in front of the tree and circled it. He told Chu Lanchi, "I will do what I can. But if I do bring this tree to life, will that wipe the slate clean of my debt? If you can grow it, then yes. That would more than make up for the debt. And if we sell the fruit for a good price, we'll even cut you in for a portion of the sales," Chu Lanchi said. "Then I will try my best. Here's to hoping it works."
Han Sen grabbade av bucket.
"What are you doing?" Chu Ming asked. "I am collecting water from the river. I'll be right back."
Han Sen sighed.
"Why? Do you really believe water is all that it takes to bring this tree back to life?" Chu Ming said, with eyes wide open in disbelief. "Yes. If there is no blood, then we must use water."
Han Sen smiled.
Chu Ming started to get feisty once again, and he barked, "Are you here just to bullsh asterisk T us? This is a mutant gene tree. You dipsh asterisk T. It's not a palm tree of the Alliance, so using water on it is pointless. Well, do you have any beast blood I can use?"
Han Sen asked, sarcastically.
Chu Ming did not respond. They couldn't even afford normal beast blood. They spent all the money they had on the inksword tree, and it had emptied their wallets. Before the harvest, they only had a small amount of money to afford the basics. "Lanchi, are you really going to let him do this? How can he think of using water on this tree? If it works, I'll kiss his feet and call him Big Boss." "Pa," Chu Ming mocked as he watched Han Sen head towards the river. "Well, there's no harm in letting him try," Chu Lanchi said. Han Sen walked to the banks of the river under the guise of fetching water, but he really wanted to perform a test. He still had 2 water drops left to use, but the tree had spent its first water drop over the course of 2 days. Using the 2 water drops directly wouldn't be viable long-term. Han Sen wanted to look around for a few genoplants to see if the black crystal would be willing to absorb their life force. The genoplants that could be found in the lands around the shelter were already owned, so he couldn't use those. But Chu Lanchi said that the river was called Jade Scale River, and its source resided someplace in Thorn Forest. Genoplants would most certainly live on the banks of such a river. That being said, they'd only be normal genoseeds. And since they weren't cared for by others due to their lack of fruit, they wouldn't be missed. Han Sen pretended to go get water so he could take a look at the wild genoplants. Han Sen took the bucket and kept walking. He was still injured, though, and he knew he'd have to be careful to avoid exhausting himself too much. For company, he summoned Meowth. It wasn't long before he found himself standing on the banks of the jade-like river. The Jade Scale River was 4 meters wide, and its water flow was mellow. There were many plants skirting its banks. Most of these were just everyday, natural plants, and not genoplants, however. Although Han Sen was unsure which ones were genoplants, he was still able to use his senses to identify them by their life force signatures. Even the lowest-tier genoplants were far more lively than normal, wild plants. Han Sen followed the river up, with Meowth down by his feet in pet status. "Meowth, if I knew things were going to be this tough, I would have brought Princess Inyang. They may not be able to fight very well here in the Third God Sanctuary, but they could at least chat with me. They could even massage me." Han Sen spoke to Meowth because Meowth was the only person that could talk to him right now. "Meow." Meowth answered Han Sen and seemed to agree with what he said. Han Sen was surprised by the response he received, and he felt as if Meowth was smarter than before. Previously, he had never given a single response. But Meowth was from the First God's Sanctuary, so its strength and intelligence was severely limited. The reason Han Sen brought him was not because he was powerful or smart, though. It was because of his sentimentality towards the pet. Meowth had been with him for so long, and he cherished his company more as time went on. He couldn't ever imagine leaving him behind. Before long, Han Sen was able to find a plant that looked especially strong. He squatted to give it a better examination. It looked like a vegetable, growing near the river. It had 8 long, serrated leaves coming out of its top. The roots were short, but stout. Across its middle, a few pretty flowers bloomed. This must be a normal Geno plant, Han Sen thought, as he brushed the leaves with his finger. Then, he looked at the black crystal in his sea of soul. Black crystal, perform your miracle once again. Everything depends on you now. After all, you got me into this predicament, so you can get me out. As Han Sen prayed, the black crystal moved. It became a black hole, and it absorbed the life force of the plant without reprieve. Within a second, the plant had dried up entirely. It was like it had been uprooted and left to wilt under the scorching sun for a few days straight. It works. Han Sen was glad, as he looked at the black crystal's changes. When the black crystal returned to normal, its body formulated another drop of water. Unlike before, though, this water drop was much smaller than the others. It was only 1/3 the size of the others, and energy it absorbed seemed to correspond with that, also. Han Sen, however, was merely satisfied in the knowledge that this seemed to work. It did not matter how much energy he received right now. In a joyous mood, Han Sen carried on his search for more Geno plants. No creature or spirit needed such plants, so there were plenty for the taking. Han Sen walked 3 miles and managed to find 5 plants, all in all. The black crystal absorbed each of their life forces and created 5 water drops. Their sizes were all different, and the biggest was only half as big as the one from the inksword tree. Strange. What is going on? The life forces of all these plants are similar, so why do the water drops differ in size? Han Sen was unsure. It was still early in the day, so Han Sen continued his search for more plants. He walked another 3 meters and found a water vine near the river. It was purple in color, and it was about 1 meter long. When the wind blew, the water would submerge the vine. The water vine was by no means outstanding in appearance, but Han Sen could sense its life force. It was far stronger than the other 5 plants he had discovered, and it was special too. Is this an ordinary class Geno plant? Han Sen was thrilled at this discovery. When he approached the vine, however, Meowth suddenly engaged its battle mode. He meowed towards the water, as if he was warning Han Sen. Han Sen took the warning and stopped moving. Then, he stared at the water vine. He had been injured, and his senses were weaker than they should have been. But after careful observation, he noticed another life force near the vine. It was more powerful than any super creature he had seen in the second god's sanctuary. Han Sen, seeing this shadow near the water vine, saw that it was about the size of a fist. If you didn't look closely, you'd believe it was the shadow of the water vine itself. He noticed it was something alive, and judging from its shape, it was like a toad that was hiding in mud. But Han Sen was very alarmed by its life force.
Han Sen slowly stepped away.
If he wasn't injured, he'd have happily continued his approach, slain the toad, and grabbed the water vine. But for now, he couldn't do that. Once he was healed, however, he resolved to return and kill it. The toad, fortunately, did not seem to have noticed Han Sen, or so, without trouble, Han Sen decided to go back. After fetching a bucket of water, he took off back to the house with Meowth at his side. Chu Ming saw Han Sen riding Meowth on his way back. With surprise, he said, "You have a pet beat soul? What class is it?" "Sacred blood from the first god's sanctuary," Han Sen responded. "What is the point of bringing it here, then? You could probably walk faster than that useless thing."
Chu Ming Edgar Lim.
"I am injured right now, don't you recall? I'm only riding it due to my injury." Han Sen hopped down off of Meowth and retrieved the bucket of water being carried in his pet's mouth. Then, after approaching the tree, he poured the water on its roots. Han Sen touched the tree and slyly dropped a life force water drop to its root as well. It was quickly absorbed. After that, Han Sen put the bucket aside and started walking back to the house so he could rest. "That's it?" Chu Ming yelled with shock and aggravation. "Yeah, that should do it."
Han Sen nodded.
"You toss some water on the ground and tell me that should do it?" After all that waiting around, Chu Ming could hardly believe what he was hearing. Well, what else do you expect me to do?
Han Sen smiled.
Chu Ming's mood had dropped a considerable amount, and so he said, I knew I shouldn't have placed any modicum of faith or hope you could aid us in this tree. Pa, what an imbecile. What use is that water going to provide, eh? I don't know. Maybe it'll be a boon and instigate the tree's revival? It might work. It might not. Han Sen then continued toward the house. Chu Ming wasn't keen to let this go, and his temper had been inflamed. He turned to Chu Lanqi and said, This Yahoo is toying with us. A 3-year-old could toss water on the roots of a tree. He is still very injured. We can't exhaust him too much. Chu Lanqi wasn't half as disappointed as Chu Ming, primarily due to the lack of hope she had for the tree in the first place. Only Chu Ming was sulking, but there was nothing he could do about it. And as much as he might have liked to, killing his burden and woe-bringer Han Sen would not achieve anything. After Han Sen poured water onto the roots, he was done with the tree for the day. He planned to examine its life force the day after. If the dragon blood tree could absorb one such water drop a day, then it meant he'd have to find more plants, a lot more. Han Sen lay down on the bed and practiced the Blood Pulse Sutra, hoping his health could fully return quickly. Meowth was around the gourd often, showing a new interest in the item. Nothing new had come from the gourd since Han Sen's arrival in the third god's sanctuary. Aside from its continued pulsing, nothing had changed with it. When Han Sen had nothing more to do and was bored, he spent some time with the gourd, pleading for it to deposit the weapons inside it. He tried a number of ways to get them out, but every method resulted in failure. The next day, Han Sen was woken to Chu Ming shouting again. He was becoming his morning rooster, it would appear. How is that possible? Chu Ming spoke with complete shock and disbelief, but his body had frozen like a cartoon statue as he stared at the tree in the yard. What is it this time? Chu Lanqi walked out of the house and then froze mid-step. She too had caught sight of the tree. They were in greater shock now than they had been upon seeing the tree first sprout its leaves. Han Sen soon followed them out the house, and when he did, Chu Ming ran towards him in a crazed dash. He grabbed his clothes and said, You? How? How did you do that? How did I do what?
Han Sen asked.
How did you make the dragon blood tree razzle and dazzle like this? Chu Ming pointed towards the tree as he spoke. Han Sen looked at the tree, and even he himself was surprised by what he saw. The tree's branches and twigs were all decked out in full, healthy red leaves. It looked like a gorgeous maple tree. Overnight, the tree had grown as if it had received appropriate nourishment every day for the past several months. It grew that fast? Han Sen did not expect the tree to grow this much, after the length of a single night, following an absorbance of one water drop. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have used an entire water drop. It was too obvious something was afoot, and the sudden flourishing of the tree would be far too suspicious. Sanmu, what did you do? How did the tree grow that fast? Chu Lanqi politely asked Han Sen, in utter surprise at the morning's revelation. It was difficult to believe that a dragon blood tree could grow into such a beautiful state overnight through natural circumstances and methods of cultivation. You saw what I did, didn't you? I fetched a bucket of water and simply poured it on the roots of the tree. I didn't do anything else. As Han Sen made his excuse, he swore to himself he'd never use an entire water drop again. But that was just river water. There is no possible way it could turn our tree into something as remarkable as this. Tell me, my darling cur, what did you do? Chu Ming's delight had slowly curdled into annoyance. With his rudeness seeping back into his words, he asked Han Sen with an irritated tone. Believe it or not, but I really did only pour out a single bucket of water, Han Sen said with a wry smile. They did not entirely believe what he was saying, but they felt like that they had to. After all, they had watched him pour the bucket of water on the tree and later return indoors for the night. Furthermore, Han Sen was injured and had no money. Even if Han Sen bought beast blood, they should have been able to see it. Although things were oddly suspicious, to the best of their knowledge, Han Sen really did only pour out a bucket of water onto the roots of the tree. And following that, somehow, the dragon blood tree was flourishing crazily fast. If I knew water from the river could achieve this, I would have done it myself many years ago, Chu Ming said to himself out loud, with a face full of regret. Sanmu, are you an experienced arborist? Chu Lanqi asked Han Sen, with an expression that said she was suddenly unsure of him. I told you I only learn a few methods from Professor Sunday, but I too am surprised they work as well as they do. Han Sen gave her a smile. As they were talking, Chu Ming grabbed the bucket and started racing off into the fields. Where are you going? Han Sen quickly stopped Chu Ming with his question. I am off to the river to retrieve more water. If I do this, we can get it to grow even faster.
Chu Ming replied hesitantly.
Han Sen then laughed in response and said, Quality over quantity, my friend. Sometimes less is more, for if we add too much water to its roots, the results we seek may sour. Things could backfire and potentially ruin the tree. When Chu Ming heard this, he immediately dropped the bucket. He ran in front of Han Sen and said, Yes, sir. From now on, I'm going to listen to whatever you have to tell me.